Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto is the son of Kronos Percy Jackson. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by AUSTINJAK0 and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Ch.1. The Brave New World. Naruto Uzumaki. Troublemaker, prankster, self-proclaimed future Hokage of Konoha, and demon child to the rest of the village. At 9 years old, he was rather short for his age, and his diet didn't really help. The only place he ever really went was Ichiraku's ramen, in part because he could afford it and in part because ramen was the greatest food in the world. Well, in his opinion. He got a discount from the runner of the place, Tucci, because he was their best customer. Anyone that went with him though had to pay the full price, as Hiruzen Sarutobi had found out many a time. As leader of the village hidden in the leaves though, he could afford it. The night however was surprisingly taxing on the old man's wallet. Naruto had just finished his 22 bowl, a new record for the blonde, and he'd just spent his last ryo, making old man Tucci dance with joy as they walked out. Ah, that really hits the spot. Thanks old man. Hiruzen chuckled quietly. Say what you will about Naruto, but he certainly had an appetite for ramen. No problem at all Naruto-kun. So how was your first week at the academy? Naruto frowned, it was alright I guess. I'm in class with a few other kids I know, so that's cool, but the teacher doesn't really like me that much. Hiruzen frowned ever so slightly. What makes you think that Naruto? Well, every time I try to answer a question, he ignores me and looks for someone else to answer it. He grinned mischievously, but I don't think he'll be able to ignore me after tomorrow. The old man sighed. Naruto, pranking your teacher is definitely not a way to get on his good side. Naruto gave a sheepish grin and scratched the back of his head. Well you got me Gigi. Maybe I should just start wearing bright colors to get him to notice me. Hiruzen groaned. Naruto's pranks were bad enough, but the thought of him wearing a neon orange jumpsuit or the like was just downright disturbing. Almost as disturbing as Guy's jumpsuit. He really needed to make sure that the two never met. Well Naruto, do whatever you think is best. Now don't you have to be getting to bed soon? Tomorrow is a school day, right? Man Naruto pouted, would you have to remind me of that Tebeo? Why do I have to go to school anyways? Hiruzen smirked well, you do want to take the hat from me, right? You'd better believe it Tebeo. Naruto said with the biggest grin he could muster. Then you have to become a ninja. And to become a ninja you have to graduate from the academy. I've heard it all before Gigi. But still, why can't I just learn from you? You're called the professor right? You'd probably be a better teacher than the one I have now. Hiruzen chuckled as they arrived at Naruto's apartment. Maybe so Naruto, but that's against the rules. Now go and get some sleep. And no pranking your teacher tomorrow. Oh Gigi, you're no fun Naruto said with a pout as he unlocked his door. See you tomorrow Gigi. Good night Naruto. Hiruzen said as he closed the door as he left. Taking a look around, he started walking back to the Hokage Tower. I should probably have a talk with Naruto's teacher. I'm not sure what good it would do, but it might at least give Naruto a chance. On a lighter note, I should probably tell Anbu to be on the lookout for one of Naruto's pranks. He won't prank his teacher, but I don't think that'll stop him from pranking someone tomorrow. He continued his musings all the way to the Hokage Tower. He had another hour of official office work left before he went home, and he intended to make the most of it. Reaching his office, he sat down in his recliner, lit his pipe and, after making sure that no one was looking, activated a seal on his chair that produced a signed copy of Ika Ika. Makeout Tactics. Having only just opened the book, it was rather disappointing and surprising when his office was illuminated by a bright flash. Immediately springing into action, the aged Hokage threw a kunai toward the disturbance, only for it to be deflected by something. Bringing his hands together and stringing together a set of hand signs, he prepares to launch his next attack, only to be stopped by a voice from inside the light. Is that any way to greet your successor, Hiruzen? Stepping out of the light was the spitting image of the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze. If Sarutobi was surprised though, he certainly didn't show it. Minato Namikaze is dead, so if you're trying to play the I look like the Hokage card, it's not really working. Minato chuckled. I assure you, Hiruzen, that I am dead. Or at least my body in this world is. Although I find it rather ironic that I was a master of time-space ninjutsu in this life, considering my other life. What do you mean by your other life? I mean the life that I had before this one and the one that I still have, it's kinda hard to explain Minato said, scratching the back of his head. Hiruzen gave confused look toward Minato. If he were to be completely honest, he was completely baffled by this conversation. Either this guy really was Minato and he'd somehow come back from the dead, or he was some insane guy pretending to be Minato that had managed to evade detection by the chakra sensor team, avoid the Anbu outside, and managed to magically appear in his office. It was more likely that he'd come back from the dead. I'm going to need more than that if I am to believe you, Minato, the old Hokage said, still holding his hands in the final seal of his jutsu. Minato sighed, alright, my name was Minato Namikaze. I was an orphan born in the midst of the Second Great War. I graduated top of my class and was assigned to Jiraiya-sensei's Genin team. I was promoted to Jonin just before the Third Great War and was given a Genin team consisting of Kakashi Haddock, Obito Uchiha, and Rin Nahara. Kakashi was promoted to Jonin just before we lost Obito on a mission and Rin went MI a year later, but the truth is that Kakashi was forced to kill her. I was given the rank of Hokage after the war ended but was only in office for 4 years. My wife's name was Kushina Uzumaki, former Jinchuriki of Kyuubi. And if that isn't enough for you, on my coronation day I walked in on you and Bawako about to. Hiruzen blushed a bright pink. He'd pretty much forgotten about that and considering it was one of the most embarrassing moments in his life, that was saying something. Alright, I get it, the old Hokage said, finally dropping his hands to his sides, you're Minato. But what are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be well dead? Minato sighed, again, I am dead. Here. In this plane of existence. But in the one I'm originally from, I'm a bit of a deity. Hiruzen just shook his head and lighted his pipe. Of course you are. So what then was a deity doing here in the first place? And again I have to ask, what are you doing here? Minato scratched the back of his head nervously, well you see I'm kinda in jail back in my universe. It's a very long story that I really don't feel like going into, but my mother manipulated me to castrate my father and eat my kids. The old man just raised an eyebrow, well I'll say that's the most interesting reason I've heard of for someone being in jail. But you still haven't answered my first question. Minato chuckled a little, I thought that'd be obvious. I'm here for my son. Hiruzen was a little taken aback, Minato, you and I both know that I can't allow that to happen. He's too valuable to the village. If the other ninja villages found out that we lost our Jinchuriki, we'd be attacked at a near continuous rate. Not to mention the power play that Danzo would make. You're talking as if you have a choice in the matter, Hiruzen. Rest assured though, I have no intention of leaving the village defenseless. Is Jiraiya-sensei still in charge of the spy network? Yes, he is. When he's not writing his books. Why? Minato smiled, well, I was thinking that I could make a blood clone of Naruto and lace it with a small amount of the Kyuubi's chakra. That way, the clone would be permanent up until the point that it dies or the real Naruto returns. We could send him away with Jiraiya for training and no one would be the wiser. Hiruzen sat down and thought about it for a while. Alright, I guess that'll work. 2 problems though. When the clone dispels, it would probably knock the real one out for a week to process all the information. And secondly, I'd rather not send Naruto to Jiraiya. He'd be a good teacher, sure, but he needs a team dynamic if he's going to succeed in this world. Minato thought about that for a moment. Well, I think the first problem is just a risk we'll have to take. So what do you propose for his training then? Let him carry out his term at the academy. He'll be able to make friends and be assigned to a Genin team when he's ready to graduate. He won't be as powerful, but he won't be able to achieve his dream if he doesn't get that dynamic. Oh? And what is his dream then? Hiruzen chuckled, why, to be Hokage of course. Minato beamed. Of course he'd want to be Hokage. He was his son after all. One last question though, Minato. When will Naruto be able to come back? Minato's look quickly turned solemn, I honestly have no idea. I would guess that he'll be able to make the journey without assistance by his 13th birthday, but without my father's blessing, it's nigh impossible. Is this the same father that you castrated at the behest of your mother? One and the same. Well, let's have faith that Naruto will be able to turn him to his side. He has a way with people like that. I'm sorry to cut this short, Hiruzen, but the dimension gap will only be open for another few minutes. Can we go and get my son? Hiruzen smiled sheepishly, well, excuse an old man for worrying about his adoptive grandson. But we probably should hurry. But that the 2 men jumped out of the Hokage tower, headed toward Naruto's apartment. X. Beep 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 beep. Naruto sat up groggily and quickly slammed his hand into the alarm clock. Ugh. Stupid alarm clock. Why did you have to wake me up? I was having such a beautiful dream about Raymond Tebeo. Climbing out of bed and yawning, he failed to notice the change in scenery. His room was cleaner than he'd left it and it now had a white metal box by the window. Wandering over to the kitchen, he also failed to notice that the bathroom had been moved from the right side to the left. Opening his cabinet, he grabbed it where he'd left his cereal box, only to find that it wasn't there. Opening his eyes, he saw that there was nothing in there at all. Huh? What's going on? Did someone steal my ramen? Turning around he noticed that his kitchen looked completely different and that there was some really expensive stuff in the room. Seriously Gigi, this isn't funny. Change my room back to the way it was. Nothing happened. Naruto looked around frantically before his eyes settled on 3 scrolls on his dresser. Haha. I knew they were pranking me. Last time Gigi did this, he left me a map to my things by accident. I didn't find out about it until later, but you can't fool me again Gigi. Grabbing the closest scroll, he opened it and began to read. Dear Naruto. I'm guessing that if you've found this letter, it means that your father has indeed taken you back to his world and that your blood clone is remaining in Konoha. I would tell you a bit about your father, but I'd imagine that he'd rather do that himself. Yes, I knew your father and your mother. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you about them, but they had many enemies that would seek you dead if they knew you lived. Both of your parents died protecting you from the 9-tailed fox's attack. Unfortunately they also had no choice but to seal the fox into you in order to save the village. I couldn't tell you about that either. I couldn't risk you falling to the fox's influence or telling people what you contained. I wanted you to lead as normal a life as you possibly could. To that end, I enacted a law that forbade people from speaking about the fox to the younger generation in the hopes that you would be able to make friends. I realize now that that may have done more harm than good. Children your age didn't like you because their parents told them to stay away and some of the elders of the village saw you as the fox reincarnate. But this new world you're going to, it will allow you to get a fresh start. To that end, I have included several scrolls on chakra manipulation and jutsu. The only way you can get the advanced scrolls though is by demonstrating that you can complete the technique of chakra manipulation required for the jutsu on a seal at the bottom left corner of each scroll. I hope that I can see you again one day Naruto-kun, but more importantly, I hope you can forgive this old man and his foolishness. With love. Dear Gigi, Sandom Hokage. P.S. No school today. At the end of the letter, Naruto was crying. He could understand the old man wanting to protect him, but keeping him in the dark about all of this was just too much. Still, he was right. If he was in a new world, then this was his chance to turn it all around. Sniffing, he looked at the bottom left corner of the scroll and, true to form, there was a small seal. Underneath it, there were the words "Put drop of blood on seal to activate." Naruto pricked his finger and put it on the seal. Sure enough, a scroll labeled Chakra for Beginners popped into his lap. Smiling and giving a silent thank you to the old man, he set both scrolls aside and picked up the next closest one. Hey kiddo. Nice to finally meet ya. Well, I met you were asleep. Anyways, my name is Minato Namikaze, better known as the Yellow Flash or the Yondaime Hokage, but you can just call me Dad. Naruto's eyes threatened to come out of their sockets. My dad is the Yondaime Hokage. Sugoi. After doing a little victory dance, he settled back down and continued reading. Your mother's name was Kushina Uzumaki. She had the most vibrant red hair that I'd ever seen. Have no doubt that we both loved you very much. We both died in that universe after Kyuubi was released from your mother's seal just after your mother gave birth to you. A man in a mask came and attacked us, using you as bait for me so that he could grab your mother and release Kyuubi. I'm sorry that I had to seal the fuzzball into you, but there was no alternative. I was sent back to my universe when I died. I'm not sure what happened to your mother. I wish I could have been there for you or that I could be now. But I can't. It's too dangerous for us both. My real name though is Kronos. I am a deity in this universe and I have many enemies. I'm trusting you to keep this a secret. You have a great power that you will have to train to unleash. But there is only one place that you can do this. You'll know where to go when the time comes. One more thing. The scroll next to this one contains the money and clothes of this world. You'll also have to learn the language of the area. It's called English. Your apartment is in New York City. I wouldn't suggest going out until you've learned the language at least a little. You can use the computer, it's the thing with the apple on it, to look up tutoring sites on the internet. I would recommend a language school for you though. Try looking for an English language school for those of Japanese descent. I also expect you to attend regular school. Pay particular attention to Greek mythology and history classes. And if you can, learn something about diplomacy. You do want to be Hokage someday, right? Lastly, know that I love you and that I have faith in you. You will make me proud someday, I just know it. Your father, Kronos Minato Namikaze. P.S. Be nice to Alex. He'll be taking care of you for the time being. Naruto put down the letter, trembling ever so slightly. The thought that he had a family that loved him and that had faith in him was a shocking concept. My father, he believes in me. I won't let you down, Dad. I promised to Bayo. Then realization struck him, wait a minute, who's Alex? The tall man in a suit appeared out of thin air and said, you called sir? Naruto made a gaping fish face before squeaking out ghost and fainting. I see. I shall come back later when you are right of mind. Good morning sir. But the man disappeared again, leaving Naruto passed out on the couch muttering something about ghosts. Ch. 2. First day of school. It was a warm September morning in New York City. The birds were chirping, the sun was shining, and people were out traversing the streets. And Naruto was having none of it. Not that he was lazy or anything, he just really wanted to stay in bed. That is until Alex came into the room. "Good morning, sir, how was your sleep?" Getting no reply, the suited man sighed and took a deep breath. "Wake up, Naruto." "Ah. What the hell, Alex? Can't you wake me up like a normal person to bayo? I'm afraid I've tried that and got no response from you more than once. And mind your language, young man." Naruto sighed and rubbed his eyes. "Well, can't you just ring a bell or something to wake me up?" Alex gave a crooked smile. Where would the fun be in that? Although waking you up with a gong might be interesting. Just forget I said anything. Alex smirked. "Of course, sir. In the meantime, I have prepared your breakfast. Also, I was to remind you that today is your first day of school. We have plenty of time though. Your school doesn't start until 11 today." Naruto looked at the clock, which read 7:30. "Why would you wake me up then?" "Simply because I felt like it, sir. I also took the liberty of signing you up in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class that starts after your school, and we still have your ninjutsu tutoring on the weekends." Naruto paled. "What? Why? Those guys are huge. And have you seen how they throw people? They'll kill me." Alex just smiled. "Maybe they will." Naruto growled. "You know I'd prank you if I could. And you know that you'd be cleaning the house for a week if you did. I really hate you sometimes, you know that." Alex turned around and said over his shoulder, "I suppose I have the intended effect then. Good morning, sir." Naruto just grumbled, got out of bed, and jumped in the shower. It had been about a year since he'd arrived in this world, and if he were to be honest, he still didn't know half the things he should about this world. The now 10-year-old stood a little over 4 feet, the average height for kids his age. It was amazing what a good diet did for him, though he still had ramen every once in a while. Originally he'd protested to having anything but ramen, but Alex was a surprisingly good cook. He really didn't know what to think of the man though. The guy was nice enough and kinda funny, but he was kinda creepy. He was always wearing a black suit with a red handkerchief and a pair of black aviators. It was almost like Alex was a Secret Service agent from one of the American movies Naruto had seen in Japanese. Plus there was that disappearing act he pulled on the day they'd met. He hadn't done it since, and when Naruto asked about it, he would just wiggle his eyebrows and say a magician doesn't reveal his secrets. That just made him even more interesting to the blonde. Still, he was a pretty good guy. While Naruto was attending English language school, Alex would always help him if there was a letter he couldn't write or a word he didn't understand. He still didn't understand some conjugations or some of the words that sounded the same but had different meanings, but his English had been deemed as passable by his instructor and he was free to attend public school for those of Japanese descent. When he wasn't learning the language though, he was learning chakra control. Or at least he was attempting to. The first exercise he was supposed to do was balance a leaf on his forehead using his chakra, but every time he would attempt to do it, the leaf would disintegrate. Not blow off or catch on fire as the scroll said it would if too much chakra was applied, but literally stop existing. It took him about 2 months, but eventually he thought it might be easier to channel the chakra to more than one leaf than to just the one. Soon enough, he managed to prevent the leaves from leaving, but only after he made himself a laurel after basically connecting something like to 20 leaves together. Alex wouldn't let him live it down for a month, saying "Hail Caesar" whenever he could. Then came the real challenge. Channeling the correct amount of chakra into the seal that contained the next lesson. He would have to do with his hands what he had done on his head. Naruto began by placing a bunch of leaves on his fingers and slowly began taking leaves away from the stack on each finger. By the time he was able to produce the correct amount of chakra on each finger to unlock the next exercise, the stack had dwindled down to 5 leaves on each fingertip. Despite that fact that it took him half a year, Naruto felt that the reward was well worth it, though he was a little miffed when his new scroll didn't have any new jutsu. The exercise he was working on now was to levitate a leaf just above each finger and spin it without it falling off. He was having trouble keeping them above his fingers. Like the first exercise, they'd always disintegrate when he tried to apply the correct amount of chakra. He figured he'd have to do some thinking on that and come up with a way around it like he did with the balancing exercise. There was an easier exercise that the scroll suggested, but Naruto was determined not to give up on the harder one until he had no other choice. Alex had also been teaching him various aspects of ninjutsu. Not chakra-based ninjutsu, but rather the arts of the ninja of this world. There were 3 categories that they were working on. Taijutsu, which was unarmed combat, Bujutsu which was staff-based combat, and Kenjutsu, which was the art of sword combat. Alex still didn't trust Naruto with a real sword though, so they used wooden swords instead. At one point Naruto had remarked that it was more likely that they were just extending their Bujutsu practice, which Alex had just smiled at and said maybe we are. It was pretty evident that they weren't though at this point, as the style was different and focused on more deadly strikes than Bujutsu, which focused on crippling blows and disabling opponents. All in all, Naruto preferred Bujutsu. He knew that if he ever got back to his world, he would be required to kill his opponents or targets on occasion, as it was the life of a ninja. Still, if it was possible for him to simply disable his opponents instead of killing them, he would do it in a heartbeat, which was why the blonde was so interested in Bujutsu. The other part of it was the fact that the third Hokage was a Bujutsu user and he wanted to emulate his grandfather figure in some way. Stepping out of the shower, he quickly dried his hair and got changed. His sense of style hadn't changed much since he was brought to this world, though the shirts he wore no longer bore the Konoha symbol. He was wearing a black t-shirt with eagles facing either shoulder and loose jeans with blue sneakers. Finding himself suitable, he moved into the next room and plopped himself in front of the TV. Most of the channels he had were in English, so he didn't understand most of what was said. Still, he found a way to make a challenge out of it, deciding to try and understand as much of what was said as possible. Earlier today the Swiss Federal Council made the decision to join the United Nations. This decision came as a surprise to many, as Switzerland has been a traditionally neutral country in past years. UN officials say they hope this will only be an example of peace in these turbulent times. In national news, officials say that repairs on the Pentagon will be completed tomorrow, just in time for the president's speech. Tomorrow also marks the one-year anniversary of the terror attacks that claimed so many lives on September 11, 2001. New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg and New York Governor George Pataki intend to make speeches at Ground Zero in commemoration of the event. Alex. Why is the TV stuck on the news this early in the morning? Why are you up so early? Because you woke me up, Baka. My mistake, sir, however you will be waking up at this time from now on, or else you'll be late for school. Perhaps after breakfast you should spend some time looking over your English book. Naruto sighed, man do I have to go to school Dadabeo? And what's for breakfast? Waffles smothered in syrup with a side of strawberries, sir, but seeing as how you don't want to go to school. Naruto was barely able to prevent a bit of drool from coming out of his mouth. Fine, I'll go to school, hurry up though. I'm hungry. X. After having an amazingly good breakfast, going over some English vocabulary, and doing a little morning workout that the old man's scroll had suggested that the blonde do to stay in shape for training, Naruto and Alex left the apartment to go on a meander. The neighborhood was pretty quiet for New York, especially considering that it was in between 7th Avenue and the Hudson River Highway. During the summer Alex would take Naruto down to the piers, sometimes to go play at the arcade, sometimes to go see a movie on the pier, and other times just to relax. The closest pier to them had a little park running the length of it. Some days there would be school groups out on it, but most of the time there were just beach goers that were too lazy to go to the beach, or some people practicing yoga. Naruto had originally been interested in what they'd been doing, but after Alex told him that yoga required one to be quiet and flexible, the blonde had dropped the issue. It was this pier that they had made their way to. Alex was sitting in one of the benches facing the water, smoking a cigarette he kept in his pocket behind his handkerchief, while Naruto was trying to climb to the top of the railing that separated the pier from the river. After managing to get to the top, he started looking for the Statue of Liberty. Alex had told the blonde many a time that the statue was visible from the pier, but Naruto had yet to find it. After failing once more, he sighed and faced the water. Now Alex-an, why is the statue so hard to find? Alex, who had just finished his cigarette and was stamping it out, turned to the blonde. Well, maybe you're just too short to see it still. You'll be able to find it in a few years. Naruto pouted, but I want to see it now. Alex smiled, well, if you want I can boost you on my shoulders and you can see it that way. Naruto smiled brightly, yes please. Alex sauntered over, picked up the blonde, and put him on his shoulders. Ooh Alex and I still can't see it. Alex sighed and shifted his weight a little, see that island over there Naruto-kun? That's the Statue of Liberty. The brownish one in front of it is Ellis Island. Hey. Yeah. I can see it now. Thanks Alex. No problem sir. Unfortunately we should get going. Otherwise you may be late for your first day of school. Looking across the water at the ferry dock clock tower, Naruto could just barely make out that it was 10:15. Oh can't we stay a little longer? Sorry sir, but we cannot. Your school is about 30 minutes away and I for one think that you should get there early and introduce yourself. Oh man. As they turned back to the path that led to the pier, Naruto looked a little more solemn than usual. Hey Alex. Yes sir. Why are some things so hard to find? Alex smiled, well, it may be because you're still a shrimp, but I don't think you're talking about the statue anymore. Naruto shook his head, no, I'm actually talking about my family. I mean, I get so close to having one for the first time and then my father just ups and leaves me. I mean you're great and all, but I don't make up for your mother and father, do I? That wasn't what I meant. No, I understand completely. You're feeling like they abandoned you and that you're stuck with me, right? No, I mean I know that they love me and all, and you're really good at taking care of me, it's just that I always imagined that my dad would see me off on my first day at the academy and that my mom would scold me when I got bad grades or pranked one of my teachers. I never had that, you know. I always assumed that I was gonna be an orphan, someone that the old man cared about. And then I end up here and find out that my father is still alive, but he can't be with me and I'm stuck with you. Alex sighed, you know, I actually chose to take care of you. I mean, I owe your father, and that played a part in it, but I was never really a part of my kids' lives. I wanted that chance, and your father wasn't able to take care of you himself, so here I am. Naruto was quiet for a moment, so why do you call me sir, then? Why not just Naruto or Naruto-kun? Alex chuckled, well, believe it or not, I used to serve your father. I just got in the habit of calling him sir, despite the fact that I'm his brother. I guess that carried over to you. Wait, back up a bit, you're my uncle. Alex scratched the back of his head, well, I am your father's brother, so yeah. Why didn't you tell me before? Well, namely because you didn't ask. Naruto almost face-planted at that, but in all honesty, I'm not sure how much longer I can take care of you. What do you mean by that? Alex sighed, well, people like me and your father were able to use a type of jutsu, for lack of a better explanation, that allows us to live the lives of others. Just as your father was Minato Namikaze, I am Alex. Neither of those forms or names are our true ones though. Naruto was pretty confused by this point, as was evident by the look on his face. So what is your true form then? And what's your real name? Alex sighed and took off his sunglasses, revealing his bright blue eyes to Naruto for the first time. My true form is something I hope you never have to see, and my name is something I cannot tell you while I am in this form. Names have power in this world, far beyond what you know. The only reason you know your father's true name is because he isn't as powerful as he once was. His power lies dormant, as does mine. But soon we will be unwillingly woken, and I will no longer be able to remain here. Alex put his sunglasses back on and continued walking down the street, with Naruto following close behind. After a few minutes of silence, Naruto ran up in front of Alex and stopped him. So for the time that you're here, does that mean I can call you Ajisan? Please. Alex eyed, yeah, you can call me Ajisan. Now come on, we don't want to be late for your first day of class, shrimp. Naruto jumped with a yada. Then realized exactly what his uncle had said. Hey, I'm not a shrimp. Of course Alex had already walked on ahead and couldn't hear Naruto's protests, so Naruto had to run just to catch up to him. Ch.3. A change in pace. Beep Naruto's alarm clock rang resoundingly through the apartment, loud enough to wake a giant, or so Alex claimed, but not loud enough to wake the blonde. In fact, it was more of a reminder for his uncle, who was able to hear the thing from the kitchen where he was cooking breakfast. Or at least that's what he always said he was doing. In reality, he was always either reading the newspaper or burying his face in a book, which wasn't such a bad thing, but the fact that he was always attempting to cook while doing this was the problem. The local grocery store had begun calling him the Bacon Man, as every 4 days he would come in and buy their biggest pack of bacon, which would last a normal person at least a week and a half. Of course, considering the amount he burned first thing in the morning and the amount both he and his nephew ate, that didn't even last half as long as it was supposed to. The day was no different in terms of his issues with cooking while reading, except for the fact that he'd managed to let the corner of his newspaper drift into the flame, so he was now trying to put out his paper with a bacon pan, making a mess of the entire kitchen. Alex sighed as he put the last strip of burnt bacon in the trash, damn, I really need to stop doing that. He quickly got more bacon out before putting it on the pan. Within a few minutes, there were 10 pieces of bacon on a plate. Alex sniffed the bacon before smiling, I think that'll do it. He picked up the plate of bacon and made his way to Naruto's room, simultaneously opening the door and turning off the alarm, before picking a single piece of bacon from the plate and dangling it in front of Naruto's nose. Wake up Naruto, if you don't wake up I'll eat all the bacon. The blonde's eyes shot open as he attempted to lunge at the piece his uncle was dangling in front of him, but failing miserably due to how comfortable he was. Ugh, I know I asked you if you could wake me up a little differently, Alex Ajisan, but I didn't mean wake me up by torturing me. Alex smiled as he ate the piece of bacon, well, it's not exactly my fault that my nephew doesn't wake up when the loudest alarm in the world goes off right next to his head. That's because you've been training me so hard. I can't feel my arms, for crying out loud. Alex frowned, well, you need to work on your form then. If you can't feel your arms, that means that you're not blocking correctly. You're supposed to distribute the force of the blow to your entire body, not keep it in your arms, so starting tomorrow I'll be putting weights on you to correct your stance. What? Why? Simply because I feel like it. Now hurry up and get ready or I'll eat all the bacon. He was already scrambling out of bed as Alex left the room. Now 12 years old, Naruto had grown a little bit taller in the 2 years that had passed since he found out that his caretaker was actually his uncle, who was now even more of a sadist than before it seemed. To Naruto it seemed that his uncle had made it his personal mission to make him miserable. First thing in the morning was at least a half-a-mile run, followed by English school or English practice, depending whether he was on break or not, followed by handwriting practice and calligraphy, which Naruto was getting really tired of. Next was lunch, usually some ramen or a sandwich, followed by 2 hours of physical training. At school it wasn't so bad considering that the gym teacher would have them do a few laps and then play kickball or dodgeball for the rest of the period. With Alex it was an entirely different story. Push-ups, pull-ups, suicides, chin-ups, crunches. Anything to exercise the body, Alex was all over it. Last year he'd started using weights during training sessions, which made it much harder for Naruto to do anything for about a week. Since then he'd begun increasing the amount of weight ever so slightly each week so as not to stunt his nephew's growth but allow him to continue gaining physical strength. Needless to say Naruto's gym teacher was surprised at the final exam. After that was ninjutsu training. After their little talk 2 years ago, Alex had upped his expectations, giving Naruto a weighted bow staff to work with and, after several months of nagging, a metal sword to work with. While it could at best be considered an oversized butter knife, it had the weight of an actual katana, so Naruto wasn't complaining. After around 2 years of getting used to both the bow staff and the weight of the actual sword, Alex said that he now considered Naruto's Bijutsu superb, as that was he focused the most on, and his Kenjutsu adequate. As a gift, he'd got Naruto a custom-made bow staff, made out of white oak and tipped on both ends with a silverish bronze metal. He said that he was also going to get a professionally made katana for the blonde, but that he would only give it to him once he felt he was ready. Naruto didn't really mind though, as the staff was enough. After arm training was unarmed training. While Naruto's jujutsu went well, it was only something that Alex used as a springboard for training. While formal training was great, he told Naruto that it would be best if he created his own fighting style. Most formal styles have specific counters that can be used against them, and in a life-or-death situation against a trained individual, this would be a major setback. So Alex made Naruto take various styles of martial arts and hand-to-hand combat in an effort to spur creativity. The end result was a potentially deadly style that relied on a little bit of quick thinking, a little bit of balance, a little bit of brute force, and a lot of quick strikes. While the faster strikes were simply used to disorient opponents, the combination of balance and power made the killing strikes. So far Alex and Naruto had developed 2 main fighting strategies named after major beliefs in Japanese society: Bushido and Zen. The Bushido strategy focused on taking the initiative in the battle and making the first strike. Alex had originally noted that Naruto showed a tendency to act without thinking and attack. After about a year of training though, he managed to break that tendency through sheer repetition. Instead of simply attacking, Naruto would make a quick overview of his opponent's strengths and weaknesses before charging in like usual. This minor difference in initial strategy made a major improvement on combat efficiency, as Naruto had an automatic tendency to focus on weaker spots in combat after that simple observation. While it still wasn't quite as fast as they both wanted it to be, the basics of the style focused on hitting hard and taking your opponent out of the fight as quickly as possible, which made up for a bit of the problem. Alex made it clear that the Bushido style was still adaptable and that Naruto would need to improve his speed drastically in order to complete it. The Zen strategy was conservative, letting the opponent come to Naruto and allowed less room to maneuver, but more time to analyze and disable. The blonde wasn't too adept at the strategy yet, as he wasn't really one for sitting still in combat. However, his uncle had drilled into him the importance of forethought, and he was slowly becoming more adept at the form. Zen focused much more on utilizing speed and dodging an opponent's attacks than actual combat. The idea behind Zen was to make it like a game of shogi or chess, luring an opponent into making a critical mistake or to create an opening and then take them down. The style presented a problem in terms of intense close combat though. When sheer speed wasn't enough, more often than not, the opponent would have an opportunity to end the game. Alex's reaction to this was having Naruto focus on jabs for 7 months. The jabs were more focused on deflecting enemy attacks than actually hurting opponents. Naruto had a few ideas on how to improve the form though, focusing on the Hyuga clan from the elemental nations for inspiration. While Naruto's scrolls went over the Hyuga Dojutsu and how it made them effective in identifying and attacking Tenketsu, he figured that if he was able to study some medical scrolls from Konoha, he'd be able to recreate the effect on an opponent's arms and legs simply by memorization and application of force. And if the jab didn't work, then a massive attack, such as a punch, might be better, or at least that was true in the blonde's mind. After all of that was free time, and free time in Alex's mind meant studying or practicing. The most recent scroll that Naruto had unlocked didn't include any specific exercise, but rather some chakra-intensive jutsu and 2 books. One on jutsu theory and the other on seals. The jutsu that Naruto had received were for those with Jonin level chakra and a few required Kage level. The techniques themselves weren't particularly difficult though, seeing as they were technically basic elemental techniques utilizing above average chakra. There were 2 jutsu of each of the basic elements. Water, fire, earth, air, and lightning. So far Naruto had been able to work on the Raiten, Ryu and the Futen, Kazakama techniques. Naruto had found that it was harder for him to do Raiten techniques for some reason, and so after completing the Ryu technique he began focusing on Futen techniques, which he got the hang of much quicker. Both were relatively easy in terms of hand signs, but were chakra intensive and had a devastating wide area effect. Luckily though, practicing the techniques was relatively easy to hide, considering the afternoon wind gusts between skyscrapers and the storms that passed over the New York area. Naruto's main focus was in sealing and the Jutsu Theory book, despite his initial desire for Jutsu. Both books grabbed his attention after he was forced to read at least a chapter of both by Alex. He found sealing to be particularly interesting, as he quickly found out that you could make infinite storage space out of a few kanji, or make a building explode with the right hand stroke and a little chakra. He'd already finished the first sealing book within a week of getting it, and he reread it twice before taking the test for the next one that the old man provided. At this point he had finished the book of sealing for intermediates, written by Jiraiya of the Sannin. Technically the level he was at now was higher than most special jonin back in Konoha, as many people had forgotten the importance of sealing, or at least that's what Jiraiya had said at the end of the book. At the point Naruto was at now, he could create baseline explosive tags and storage seals, as well as a single paralysis seal. He didn't intend to stop there though. He aimed to make it all the way to master class so he could make his own new seals and perhaps create his own summoning contract. He even had plans to create time seals that would slow time in combat and allow him to move unaffected. Although he hated that his father's name was easily confusable with the deity of time, he thought he might as well take inspiration from it. Without actual instruction though, he wouldn't be able to create the more advanced seals that the book mentioned, nor would he be able to create his own. In the same breath, he also wanted to begin creating jutsu, but he had no one to consult on the practice. Aside from the fact that there wasn't anyone for him to learn jutsu or applied jutsu theory from in this world, there weren't many people back in the elemental nations that created their own jutsu anymore. Those that did were usually at or above A rank class, which meant 2 things. Their jutsus were minimally B rank, and that it was rare to get one alone to learn from them. Having quickly finished taking a shower and throwing on some clothes, Naruto hurried down the hall to the dining room. Alex was already sitting at the front of the table, drinking his morning cup of coffee while looking at the second copy of the newspaper he'd delivered. It had just become something he'd gotten used to, having managed to destroy every first copy since he started getting the thing. Naruto usually sat at the other end of the table, so he would put bacon and eggs with some toast on a plate and leave it there for the blonde. Although he always threatened to eat his nephew's breakfast, he never actually would. The boy took him too seriously, in his opinion. "So what are we doing today, Ajisen?" Naruto asked in between bites bacon. Alex took another sip of his coffee and set down his newspaper. "Well, seeing as you're done with school for the year, I thought that we could go on a short road trip to the Saratoga battlefield." Naruto frowned a little. "Why do you want us to go there? There's nothing there but old cannons and a big river. Which happens to flow faster than the river here, which is perfect for your water walking training, and you can work on water jutsu without poisoning yourself. Besides, the amount of space that the battlefield has would be a good training ground for your larger scale wind jutsu." "Sounds good to me, but can we get some decent ramen when we come back?" Alex eyed. "Fine, but only if you surprise me today." "Yada. Thanks Alex Ajisen. I promise I won't let you down." Alex smirked. Yeah, kid. Finish your breakfast and grab your backpack. I've already rented the car for the day." The 3-hour drive from New York to Saratoga was boring for the most part. Naruto practiced a few wind manipulation techniques through the window as they went down the I-87 freeway, and Alex launched into several historical lectures when they passed a city with an old name and spent the last half hour of the trip going over the Trojan War because they passed Troy. Well, it wasn't that bad for the blonde, it did get rather dull at some points. The only thing that he was even remotely interested in from the Trojan War were the strategies behind the attack. He wasn't a particularly great strategist, but his unpredictability allowed him to win most of the matches of chess or Go he'd played or lose horribly. In order to master the strategies that they'd made, and in order to allow Naruto to learn the basics of command, Alex had Naruto go to Lincoln Park every once in a while and play chess, or occasionally Go or shogi. The blonde had good forethought when he tried, but was primarily adaptable in terms of the actual strategy. It made him really hard to beat. Having finally arrived at the park though, Naruto was overexcited to train. Alex simply sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. To his misfortune, they weren't in the park yet, and so Naruto had begun trying to draw water out of a few leaves that had fallen in the car from a particularly big backfiring of a wind manipulation technique. It wasn't going so well and thus the air in the car had begun whipping around a bit. While it was hot as hell outside, it was already pretty cool in the car and Naruto was just making it colder. With a slight shiver, Alex put his foot on the gas and pulled up to the Forest Service check-in. "What can I do for you today, sir?" the guy in the booth asked. Alex sighed contentedly with the sudden rush of warmth. "I would like 2 tickets for entrance, 1 adult and 1 child, and is there any chance we can get down to the river today?" 1 adult and 1 child comes out to $10 even. As for the river, due to heavy rainfall the river walk is closed. If you're interested though there are several tours of the battlefield going on today, as well as a reenactment. Alex meditated for a moment, then spoke, "Well, we didn't come all of this way for nothing, I suppose you can sign us up for one of the tours." "Alright, your total comes out to $25.44 with the tour." Alex paid the man who then handed him the tickets and said have a good day before allowing the duo into the park. After finding a suitable parking spot, Naruto bolted out of the car, heading towards the river, before being caught by the scruff of his neck by Alex. "Come on Oji-san. Let's go." Naruto whined. Alex shook his head. "Naruto, didn't you hear me talking with the nice gentleman in the booth? He said the river was closed today." "What?" "You heard me, but I managed to salvage the situation." "Really? So what are we going to do?" 2.5 hours later, Naruto was seriously considering running away simply out of sheer boredom. They'd spent about half an hour wandering around the park, checking out all the old weaponry and whatnot, before spending 2 hours being guided around by an old guy who eerily reminded him of the teacher from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, seeing the exact same stuff he'd already seen. To make matters worse, there were end-of-year school trips here. I mean sure, being around kids his own age was great for Naruto, but they were all particularly annoyingly loud. There was also a group of kids from a special school that, for the most part, were particularly annoying. There were a few quiet kids there though, but there was a particular kid with black hair in the back that Naruto felt like he recognized from somewhere, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Then there were 3 particularly tall men standing in the rear. They all had the same look. Hawaiian shirts and aviator shades with bald heads that accentuated their bulky bodies. It looked like Alex had been paying particular attention to them, and while Naruto admitted that it did look like there was something off about them, he was kind of used to that kind of thing. But right now, he was just really happy that the tour was almost over. "Hey Naruto," Alex said, "as soon as this tour ends we need to head straight to the car, alright? I want to be back in the city before nightfall." "Sure, Alex Oji-san. We both know you're just afraid of getting stuck in rush hour traffic." Alex smirked, "So? We both know that it's absolutely horrible." Naruto nodded in ascension to that. And thankfully, within 5 minutes, the tour was over. "Come on Alex Oji-san. I'll race you to the car." "No racing Naruto, now come on." Whatever he was about to say died in his throat when the 3 bodybuilders in Hawaiian shirts surrounded them. The one directly behind Alex was the first one to speak. "Kus, brother of Kronos, our master requires your presence. Now." And who might your master be, I wonder?" "It isn't Kronos. He's never been the type to recruit golems." "I take it that means mother is up to something, then." This time the one behind Naruto spoke, "We are here to escort you to our master, nothing more. If you do not comply, your nephew will die." "Hey Oji-san, what the hell is that language you're speaking? Some weird dialect of English?" Quickly switching to Japanese, Alex shifted his attention to Naruto. "I'll explain later, but you need to listen to me now. When you get the chance, I want you to run to the car. I'll be right behind you, okay?" Naruto's expression quickly shifted to that of a well-trained ninja, only nodding in reply and looking for potential escape routes. Meanwhile on top of hill. "Come on kids, time to leave. Everyone get in line." The particular black-haired 5th grader wasn't paying much attention to his teachers though and was inspecting a bronze cannon instead. "I wonder what one of these things sounds like when it goes off, bet it's loud." "Hey kid," his instructor called, "come on, the tour is over." The kid jumped, accidentally hitting the back of the cannon, which promptly went off and destroyed the bus he'd come in on. Ahoo whoops. Near the parking lot. An earth-shattering boom rolled across the field, making the bodybuilders look up. By the time that they'd looked back down, both of their targets were gone. We lost them. Master will not be pleased. Don't worry. We know where they're going. So be it. And with that, the three figured melted into the earth as if they were never there. And that's a wrap. Yet again, sorry for the wait. Hope it meets expectations. Ch.4. Taking the plunge. Alex was grimacing as he raced down the I-87 freeway, hitting 100 miles per hour at some points. Naruto was crouched up a bit, trying to stay away from the speed that Alex was hitting. He was more worried, however, about the bodybuilders that they'd ran away from. What the hell was that Alex OG? Who were those guys? Those were golems. They only serve my mother, Gaia. As for why they were there, if I had to guess, my mother wants to recruit me for her war. The war? Why? As your father's brother, I have almost the same power as he does. I'd be recruited as a general of sorts, or at least a commander. As for the why, I'd bet she wants to go to war with the gods again. Seriously? That's the idea. Your father has always been loyal to family, but when his children were born, Gaia was afraid of their combined power and their influence over your father. She tricked him into devouring them. Zeus escaped though, and declared war on your father. We still don't really know what happened after that. By the time that we regained our consciousness, the war was over and we were stuck in Tartarus. We later learned the events of the war through human tales, but none of us, myself included, remember a damn thing. If I had to guess though, we were likely manipulated by our mother into fighting the war. She was always a little power hungry. If there had been a contest on the stupidest face being made, Naruto would have won it at the moment, slack-jawed and bug-eyed as he was. So wait a second, grandma made dad eat my siblings, and then she may have started a war with them. And she wants to start another one. That basically sums it up, yeah. Well, that sucks. Pretty much. Silence reigned for a few minutes as Naruto watched the road speed by, no doubt going over the information he was given. So Alex OG-san, where are we going? Alex grunted in concentration as he sped past a small group of cars on the highway. First we're going home to pick up a few things. Then we're going out to Long Island. What's in Long Island? Somewhere where you can continue your training in safety and secrecy, and somewhere where the golems can't follow us. They arrived back in Manhattan within roughly 2 hours by speeding through unpopulated areas and violating several traffic laws. If the police knew, they'd probably have gotten at least 100 speeding tickets on the way back, but right now that was the least of their worries. Parking the car just outside the house, both Alex and Naruto rushed inside and went about collecting things for the impromptu trip. Naruto was told to pack a backpack full of anything he wanted to bring as well as his staff. Right now he had all of his scrolls in the bag, as well as a few textbooks on English, kanji, and strategy. He also had a chessboard and a go board packed, as well as a few pictures of him and his uncle on the pier, which he surrounded with a few clothes in order to act as padding. He slung the bag over his right shoulder and grabbed his staff before stepping out into the kitchen. Alex, meanwhile, was rummaging through his closet. He had a few shirts laid out on his bed, but was looking for something else. He suddenly jolted up, finally finding what he was looking for. Naruto. Naruto, come here for a second. Naruto put his backpack on the kitchen counter and leaned his staff against a chair before running over to his uncle. From what he could see, his uncle was holding something covered by an ornate sheet about 2 feet long. What's up, OG-san? Alex ran his fingers through his hair. Naruto, I think it's time that I gave you something that you should have gotten a while ago. Alex unfurled the cover of the object and Naruto's eyes widened noticeably. The sheet was concealing an ornate katana and a matching tanto, both decorated in silver. The katana had a 2 feet long blade with an 8-inch handle, both decorated in silver. The blade itself was engraved with the kanji for peace on one side and ninja on the other, and the edge was coated in bronze. The hilt of the sword was made of sharkskin, and the butt was engraved with the kanji for fox. The tanto was made in a similar fashion, with the exception of the fact that the only kanji on it was for ninja. Both sheaths were an unassuming pure black, with a small point of silver where the tip of the blade would rest. I had these made a year ago by the best smith I could find in Japan who still used the old techniques. Your staff was made by the same person. Both are capable of injuring and killing the golems and their ilk, although you will need much more experience in order to take one of the golems down. The blades are different from the staff though in that they respond to your commands. As soon as you touch them, they'll respond to your thoughts. They're queued up to your mindscape, so if you need them, all you have to do is think about them. Your staff is similar, although it can't be summoned, but it can't be lost. To everyone else, it appears as a walking stick. If you lose it, it will come back to you. Naruto was running his hands over the katana while Alex was talking. Wow, I really don't know what to say, OG-san, thank you. Not to be rude though, but why did you do all of this? Alex smirked. Because I felt like a kiddo. Now go make sure that you've got everything you want to bring with you, I think it'll be a while before we can come back here. Naruto gave a mock salute and went back to make sure he had everything that he wanted, taking the sword and tanto with him. He wasn't quite willing to use them yet, but as a ninja and a demi-titan, he knew he'd have to someday. Alex watched with a sad smile as he rummaged around in his closet, looking for a few extra pairs of jeans. Truth is, Naruto, you're a lot more important than you think you are. I've done my best to prepare you for what's coming, but you still have a ways to go. I know that you'll rise to the occasion even without me. 2 hours later and Naruto and Alex were back in the car, racing toward the middle of Long Island. They'd gotten off the highway a few minutes ago and were racing down the road next to the beach. The sun was getting close to setting and there wasn't much pollution out on the island, at least compared to the city, so the sun didn't seem as intense and there were more colors in the sky. The reflection on the water was almost blinding, but at certain points where there wasn't much glare, it was a beautiful sight. They passed a couple of beach houses. Little more than shacks, but still popular with those that love the water. They took a winding road away from the beach, speeding by old discolored farmhouses and faded white picket fences. So OG-san, Naruto started, you never did tell me what language you and those guys were speaking earlier. I know that wasn't Japanese, and I seriously doubt that it was any variation of English that I've heard. Alex sighed and took his foot off the gas, setting cruise control and leaning back a bit. You'd be right on that, Naruto, that was actually an ancient dialect of Greek, older than the gods themselves. Being of Titan blood, if I were to speak regular Greek or Latin, you might be able to understand it, might being the operative word. However, once you manage to activate your Titan blood, you should be able to understand the ancient languages that the Titans and the gods speak and maybe an affinity to a particular element like the gods and their children do. Naruto perked up a bit at hearing that, so what power would I have? And why hasn't my Titan blood activated yet? Alex's attention was back on the road at the moment though, taking a sharp left onto a narrower road, speeding past more discolored farmhouses and picket fences, with the occasional sign of pick your own strawberries nailed to them. The shoreline was well out of sight by now, covered up by the ancestral trees of New York State. If it could be equated to some event, it would be best described as driving through an age long since past. If I had to guess, I would say that it has something to do with your chakra network. Having Titan blood in them would kill any normal human straight away. However, your chakra network acts as a dam for that. I would guess that it regulates the amount of power that you can get at any given point in time. I don't know how long it'll take you to get the full amount of power from it though. As for your power, I have no idea. Zeus ended up with lightning, Poseidon ended up with water, and Hades ended up with death and wealth. It seems to be completely random. Naruto looked a little disappointed but quickly regained his former excitement. So what powers do you and my dad have? Alex chuckled, well, Titans don't exactly have powers. We embody different characteristics of nature and in some instances, humanity. For example, your father embodies leadership in the harvest and is often mistaken as Kronos, the primordial embodiment of time. I embody intellect and balance. Only the gods embody elements of human fears and society. Silence reigned in the car as Naruto processed all of the information he had just been fed before he frowned. So dad doesn't have power over time? Alex sighed in frustration, seriously Naruto? That's all you got out of all I just said? Whatever else Alex was going to say died in his mouth as the car suddenly flipped. There was no warning, no blast. The car simply flipped and skidded along the road until it met a ditch. Naruto, hey Naruto. Ugh, Aja-san, what just happened? I have no idea, but the car shouldn't have just flipped by itself. Grab your stuff in the back and jump out the window. I'll meet you outside. Naruto did as he was told, unbuckling his seatbelt and falling rather unceremoniously onto the roof and reaching behind him and grabbing his backpack. He threw it through the already opened window before climbing out himself to see that Alex was staring down the 3 bodybuilders from before and that he was being flanked by 2 new ones. Ah great, these guys again. We told you once, Kus, we will not tell you again. Our master requires your presence. It would be unwise for you to deny her. We will kill your nephew if you do. Alex sighed, I've already fought in a war and gave up the chance to raise my children on her orders. What more do you want? We do not have answers to your questions, we are simply to get you to master by any means necessary. Alex sighed again and turned toward Naruto, then back to the bodybuilder. So this is my last day in the mortal world, huh? Might as well go out fighting, Alex thought. Alex switched back to Naruto and began speaking in Japanese. Naruto, I need you to listen to me right now and do exactly what I say. Can you see the hill with the pine tree? Naruto looked confused, considering that they had managed to crash just outside of the forest. A little ways away though, there was a hill with a single pine tree on its summit. Yeah, I see it. When I say so, I want you to run for it, alright? Naruto frowned, you know I'm not going to do that, right? If this is going to come down to a fight, I want to help. Alex shook his head, not with the way I fight. All you do is get in the way. Aside from that, these guys are way out of your league. But there has to be some way I can help. You can help me by living. You can help me by getting stronger. You can help me by living up to your potential. But this fight is mine. Now get ready." Naruto wanted to protest but got ready to run anyways. He had faith that his uncle would be able to win. Alex turned his attention back to the bodybuilders. "So, your master wants me for her war, eh?" "Yes. We are here to retrieve you for master." Alex smirked. "Would you like to know why I'm called Kus the Mad? I have a tendency to fight like a madman." He kicked the nearest bodybuilder back, shattering him into bits of earth before turning to the other two near him and picking them up by their throats and slamming them into the ground, turning them to pebbles. Meanwhile, Naruto had managed to get away from the two bodybuilders as they had charged toward Alex. He still wanted to help, but even he could feel that the fight was way out of his league. Alex was releasing his full power on the bodybuilders and they were going all out against him. Meanwhile, Alex had taken down the other two golems. "Come on. Is that all you got?" The pieces of the golems began making new golems and each piece drew from the earth around it to create a new golem. There were now at least 50 golems that had formed to replace the previous 5. Alex fought them all off though, destroying each and every one by slamming them into the pavement or into each other. But from each golem, 10 more were created. By this point Naruto was halfway up the hill and turned around to see how his uncle was doing only to see him get overwhelmed by the sheer number of the golems. The golems surrounded Alex before speaking unanimously in monotone. "You thought you could outrun master? You were sorely mistaken. She wants to see you, immediately." The earth around Alex crumbled and folded, sucking the golems and Alex into the earth, leaving no trace of their existence. Naruto was shaking in distress and rage. "Hey Alex Oji-san. You took Alex Oji-san. I'll kill you." The last thing Naruto remembered was a feeling of rage washing over him and then he blacked out. Ch.5. Welcome to camp. Naruto was dizzy. He also knew that he was in bed, though it was not his own. The pillow was too big to be the one he used back at the apartment. He also knew that he usually didn't wake up facing the ceiling, nor were his ceilings as high as the room he was currently in. If he had to guess, he was in a hospital of some sorts. And, rather unsurprisingly, the blonde gave a groan at his current predicament. "Ah good. You're awake." A man's voice to the right side of the bed exclaimed. Naruto tilted his head to the side, though not too fast as so to avoid even more dizziness, and looked at the source of the voice. The man was seated in what appeared to be a wheelchair, which gave the blonde the impression that he was a fellow patient, but he was dressed in a pinstripe suit that looked 20 years out of date. His face wasn't particularly unique, save for the fact that his beard looked like that of Abraham Lincoln and oddly complemented his eyes. He had a blanket covering his legs in the wheelchair and looked oddly comfortable. "Ugh, where am I?" Naruto asked in a tired voice. The man gave a light chuckle. "You, my dear blonde friend, are located in the infirmary. You've been out for a few days now. Quite the car wreck if I do say so myself." Naruto jolted upright as the memories came back to him. The trip to the battlefield, the rockheads disguised as bodybuilders, the car flipping, and the rockheads overwhelming his uncle. What happened to my uncle? Where is Alex Oji-san? And what happened to those stupid rockheads? The man in the wheelchair sighed and put his hand on Naruto's shoulder. "I'm sorry son, but you were the only one we found aside from a trashed car, several piles of rocks, and your weapons, or at least we think they're yours." Naruto went silent. Alex was gone. His uncle was gone. He just couldn't accept it. But it had to be true. He saw his uncle get overwhelmed, he saw Alex get taken. The rockheads took him. But looking back, it seemed like Alex gave up. He was kicking ass and then he just stopped. But what was even weirder was the fact that he didn't remember anything after that. He would have thought about it more, but his dizzy spell came back. Without resistance he fell back into the bed. "Look," the man said with a weary sigh, "why don't you get some more rest? Tomorrow I'll introduce you to the rest of the camp." The last thing that Naruto saw was the man stand up, but his vision was a bit distorted, so he just looked like a black blob except for his beard, and then he blacked out again. It was cold and damp in the place that Naruto woke up in next. Surprisingly, he wasn't dizzy anymore and was free to observe his surroundings as he stood up. It looked like an old rusty sewer, although the water running through it was clean. There were dozens of pipes running along the main line that he was in, each and every one splitting to others further down the line. They all echoed with a pulsing noise, not dissimilar from a heartbeat. But it was more than that. For some reason, Naruto felt the need to follow the beating to its source, further down the pipes. He complied with the urge, waking further down the pipeline along the way. He found himself wondering exactly how he'd gotten there and would have wondered aloud if he could, but found that he could not speak, nor could he cease his movement. And so he continued this way for quite some time until he managed to reach the center of the solar system, which was similar to the pipe he'd just walked through, with the exception of the fact that the room was about as tall as the Chrysler Building and was sealed off by huge metal bars at the other end. The pipes pulsed even more in this cavernous room, with pipes coming from the area behind the bars as well as above where Naruto was standing. The majority of both pipes led into what looked to be a gauge of some kind that was linked to a tank filled with a golden liquid. It was then that Naruto found he could move on his own again as he began making his way toward the tank with a strangely beautiful golden tank by his own volition. Before he could reach it though, a heavy voice boomed out from behind the bars. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Naruto stopped moving and redirected his attention toward the bars. "If you touch that tank before you're ready, it will spell the end of us both, and that is something I cannot allow." The great red eye peered out of the gate, accompanied by the barring of white fangs. This was all that Naruto could see at first, but as he stared at the figure, the thrashing of tails became visible in the dark background, visible only because of the light reflected by the shiny white teeth. It was at this realization that the blonde began moving away from the tank and towards the bars, stopping at what he felt to be a safe distance from them. "You must be the Kyuubi no Kitsune, am I right?" Naruto asked a figure in front of him. "I am." "Well, in that case allow me to introduce myself. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, your container and future Hokage of Konoha." The fox grunted, or at least it sounded like a grunt. "I already knew who you were, Gaki. I know everything about you. Your aspirations, your dreams, your parents. But I have to say, this is the first time that any of my containers have ever bothered being polite." Naruto smiled. "Well, I'm glad I've made a good first impression at least. But seeing as you're contained within me, I think I should ask if you knew anything about me blacking out." The giant fox growled, "If you didn't have your father's blood in your veins, I would be trying to kill you right now, but you were polite, so I suppose I can answer that." The fox grinned. "I took over your body. You gave in to your hatred, your anger, and I used that as a bridge to your body. I killed those pathetic piles of rock within seconds, but you had to butt in before I could have any fun." Naruto looked contemplative for a second before bowing toward the fox. "Then I am in your debt. If you had not intervened, I would likely be dead or imprisoned right now, and for that I thank you." Standing from the bow, he looked about him and then back toward the fox. "I don't suppose that I could interest you in a deal of sorts." The fox barked out a laugh before Naruto could finish. "What could you possibly offer me, Gaki?" "My freedom. For that is all I wish for." Naruto shook his head. "No, I can't do that. From what I know of sealing it would kill me, and besides, I have no guarantee that you would not rampage about New York and try to destroy the world. I can, however, change your accommodations, or at least I think I can." "I am listening intently." "Well, if I'm right and we're inside of my mind, then I can control everything that's here. From the sewer to the bars to how the place looks. I could change it to something I think you'd like." "And what do you want in exchange for this change of scenery?" "Well, for one I'd like to be able to chat with you when I can, and I'd also like to access some of your power, but only when I absolutely need it." Both the fox and Naruto were silent for a few minutes thereafter before the fox lifted its head. "Very well, Gaki, I will give you my power when you need it, and I will allow you to badger me with your annoying speech when you want to visit. However, I reserve the right to deny both on my own circumstances. That is my price for saving your life." Naruto smiled. "Fair enough. Now then, give me a few seconds." He closed his eyes and concentrated on himself, going into a state of meditation that only masters would be able to achieve. Considering he had already achieved consciousness within his mind though, it wasn't hard to get to where he was going. He saw the inner workings of his mind and why it was like this. His mind was attuned to the circumstances he lived in for the first few years of his life, alone and dark. Before the old man, before his dad, before New York, he'd been a simple orphan that no one seemed to like. Now things are different, he thought. He focused on the memories of the old man, of his time with Alex, of his dad's note. He thought of what faith his father placed in him, of what trust the third had in him. Then he thought of his dream, to be Hokage of Konoha, and what it would mean for him. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the sewer-like environment he was in had been and was gone, replaced with trees native to his home village. Instead of pipes, red and blue vines now wound their way down tunnels created by a thick canopy of trees. Where the bars that contained the Kyuubi once were, there now rose impossibly tall stalks of bamboo, in the same location and position just as the bars were. Giving a smile at his work, Naruto bowed once again toward the Kyuubi, though this time more of a bow that one gives after a performance. "And this will do, I suppose, though being rid of these infernal bars would be best. Still, it is much cozier." "Very well, I will honor our agreement. For now though, I have grown weary of your presence." With his piece said, the fox retreated back behind his stalks of bamboo, and a tree sprouted beneath Naruto's feet, carrying him back into the conscious world. "Well, the boy is interesting at the very least." Perhaps he can become strong enough to face the challenges that lie ahead, the fox thought as he lay down on his new leaven bed. Yes, things certainly will be interesting. Naruto awoke with a start, still staring at the ceiling of what he gathered to be the infirmary. It was daytime, which meant that he'd either woke up later the same day, which he doubted, or he'd woken up the next day, which seemed more likely. To his happiness, the dizziness had faded away and he was able to look about the room. There wasn't much else to be seen in the room aside from neatly made beds, but there were several windows open that let in the cool breeze to relieve the sweltering heat of summer. Standing up, Naruto found himself dressed in a gray shirt and blue jeans. It wasn't really his style, but it seemed to work well enough. He made his way to the closest window to try and figure out exactly where he was. It was a beautiful summer day, by the looks of it. Naruto guessed that he was on the north shore of Long Island simply because of the water out past the closest buildings. There looked to be fields and forests in the area as well, but what was oddest were the Greek-looking buildings dotted across the landscape. They were of various heights and sizes, but they all had polished white marble columns and roofs made of tile. There was a small lake in the middle of the area and from what the blonde could see there were people canoeing across it. Ahem, a voice said from behind Naruto. Turning, he saw a blonde girl that looked to be right around his age, wearing an orange t-shirt and jeans. Her blonde hair was a lighter shade than Naruto's and she had gray eyes, but other than that there didn't appear to be anything remarkable about her. If you're done sightseeing then I've been told to deliver you to the camp directors as soon as possible, the girl said with a slight twinge of annoyance. Ah, sorry, Naruto said sheepishly, it's just not every day that you wake up in a room that has a view like this one, much less a day that you see stuff that looks like Greek architecture in its prime. The girl shrugged, I guess I can understand that, sorry for being so brash, I'm just in a bit of a rush. The name's Annabeth Chase, she said extending a hand. Naruto Uzumaki, he said taking the offered hand and shaking it, so 2 questions. Where am I and where are the things that I had on me when I came in? Well, I think the directors will give you a more detailed version, but you've arrived in Camp Half-Blood and the things you had with you are being stored in the armory until Chiron gives you a clear pass. Alright, I would ask you a few more questions, but you said you were a bit busy, so let on. Annabeth nodded and led Naruto onto the porch, which looked like it wrapped around the whole building, toward 2 men who were sitting around and playing cards. One of them was the man that had been at his bedside, sitting back in his wheelchair. The other one looked like a fatter version of Cupid that got lost in a middle-age crisis and had a drinking problem. Annabeth cleared her throat, causing the 2 men to look up from their game. Mr. D. Chiron, may I present Naruto Uzumaki? Naruto bowed slightly, I am in your debt for taking care of me for the past few days. The man who had been at his bedside waved him off, think nothing of it my dear boy. Although I'll admit, I didn't expect you to be this polite. Naruto stood and scratched the back of his head, well, my uncle was very adamant about teaching me proper manners to those that I need to make an impression on. Considering you've taken care of me for the past few days, it's only polite. The other man that looked like Cupid HMPH''D, well at least one of you has decent manners when addressing your superiors. For once I am happy to welcome someone to Camp Half-Blood. My name is Dionysus, but most of these infernal campers call me Mr. D. The fake cripple over there is Chiron, the camp instructor. You wouldn't happen to be the Greek god of wine, would you? And Chiron as in the teacher of heroes Chiron? Chiron laughed, well aren't you a sharp one? Yes, we're one and the same. Naruto smiled, so I actually made it after all yada. After a few seconds of everyone present clearing the ringing in their ears, Mr. D spoke up again, perhaps I was wrong in my judgment of your character, Uzumaki, but from what you said it sounds like you were looking for this place, and if I'm not mistaken you spoke Japanese. Naruto, who was too excited to notice the subtle change of his name, nodded vigorously, yeah, I'm originally from a place that spoke Japanese as the first language. My uncle taught me how to speak English and what I know about Greek mythology. He said that I was supposed to go to the hill with a pine tree at its top, we were going there to help me learn how to take care of myself. Chiron gave a weary smile, you have no idea how common your situation is to some of the other campers. I am happy to say though that you've reached your destination, if what you've said is accurate. This camp is located behind a pine tree at the top of a hill, and if I'm right then he intended for you to receive training here. Naruto nodded happily, yeah, I just didn't want to say that for risk of seeming. Annabeth interrupted him with a slight glare, insane, crazy, mad, nuts. Yeah, we get that a lot. Naruto smiled sheepishly, sorry didn't mean to offend. Mr. D cleared his throat rather loudly, anyways, what I want to know is about your uncle. It's rare that half-blood children are still in touch with their families, other than the other parent that is. So where is your other parent? Naruto looked down at the floor, my mother died giving birth to me. Mr. D nodded solemnly. He understood to an extent, seeing as he was the father of hundreds of children over the years. Over time, he'd become dull to the pain of losing his children, but he imagined the pain was just about as bad as never knowing your parents. Tyron simply sighed, and Annabeth looked at the blonde a little differently. After all, there weren't many who understood her pain at the camp, and even though her father was still alive, they were estranged to the point of no contact, so she felt like she could sympathize with her fellow blonde. My uncle found me in an orphanage a few years ago, Naruto lied convincingly, and adopted me as soon as he could. Mr. D nodded again. Any reason why you think he'd be taken? No idea whatsoever, Naruto lied once again. Of course, he couldn't just come out and say that his uncle was a titan, nor could he say that he was the son of Kronos, that would probably get him killed. Well, Mr. D said as he relaxed back into his chair, it isn't uncommon for some of our darker elements to kidnap the relatives of those they think will be powerful elements in the future, or those that they think would make good slaves or spouses, but it's been eons since such a thing happened. Still, if what you say is true, then I doubt you'll see your uncle again. Excuse me, Mr. D, but I have faith that I will. In fact, I promise you right now that I will find my uncle again, regardless of what I have to do to get to him. Dionysus was taken aback. It was rare for a mortal to even try to challenge him, much less the campers. But this boy, he had a spark in his eye he hadn't seen since Theseus when he went into the labyrinth. While Athena may have been the one sponsoring his little quest, he had wanted to assist him as well. A small smile spread across his face. Well then, you may have to wait a while before you can go get him, Uzugaki. The camp isn't allowed to partake in any more quests for the time being, and that doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. He turned to Chiron, Chiron, could you call Luke Castellan up here? Chiron nodded and turned to Annabeth, Ms. Chase, would you mind fetching Luke for us on your way back to your class? Annabeth blushed a little, but nodded her ascension and scurried off the porch, leaving Naruto, Chiron, and Mr. D sitting around the table. So Mr. D began, anyone up for a game of Pinochle? Naruto scratched his head in confusion, what kind of game is that? Chiron chuckled, it's a card game my boy. How about we teach you as we go, alright. As Luke approached the balcony of the big house, he had to dodge several cans of soda and decks of cards flying in all directions. It wasn't all too uncommon for the two camp directors to get into bouts like this, though this time it was unusually more dramatic. How in Hades can a kid who doesn't even know how to play win every round? Not even Zeus is that lucky. The obvious voice of Mr. D shouted as he threw another summoned can of soda down onto the floor below. The can then promptly exploded, leaving the porch floor a sticky mess. It was this sight that Luke walked in on. Dionysus flailing about like a madman, which he was, Chiron looking like he'd seen a ghost, and some short blonde kid who was still sitting at the table with a smug look on his face, and all the poker chips they usually played with in front of his seat. So, he promptly picked up half a destroyed can of soda that was laying on the floor and threw it, pegging Chiron in the head. The zoned-out director promptly returned to the land of the living and cleared his throat, stopping Dionysus's rant cold and drawing all attention to the salt and pepper blonde. You wanted to see me, sir? Actually, Mr. D spoke, I was the one that wanted to see you, Casserole. Luke flinched at the misspeaking of his name, but paid attention nonetheless. I wanted to ask you the condition of cabin 11 and, moreover, the state of your occupancy. Well, we still have a few beds open, but there's not much room for personal effects or much else for that matter. I see. Well, as I would hate to see your cabin stretched to capacity, I have seen fit to alleviate some of your burden. He turned to Naruto with a curious look on his face that matched Naruto's own. Normally you would be sent to cabin 11 as an unclaimed demigod and they would thus take you in. However, I am in a particularly good mood today, so, he cleared his throat, Naruto Uzumaki, I hereby name you as a champion of the god Dionysus, lord of drink, pleasure, and madness. You are hereby granted to enter any domains I may own and are, unless otherwise directed, to represent me to the best of your ability in combat, diplomacy, and all things under my domain. You swear these things on the river Styx, upon pain of death or until released from your duty. Naruto, although he had no idea what exactly was going on, said, I swear. Thunder boomed in the distance. Dionysus smiled, the deal is done. Rise, Naruto Uzumaki, champion of Dionysus. As Naruto stood, an ethereal image of a wine glass surrounded by vines appeared on top of his head. Chiron was smiling, though he was inwardly flabbergasted at what had just happened, while Luke's mouth was gaping, and Naruto, who didn't entirely know what was happening, was staring at the wine glass hovering above his head. Mr. D once again cleared his throat, yes, well, now that that business is done, would you mind showing Naruto to cabin 12 Mr. Calamari? I'm sure he'll be delighted to meet his new bunk mates. Luke snapped out of it and nodded, follow me Naruto. Naruto stood and followed Luke off the porch. Once they were clearly out of hearing range, Chiron turned toward Dionysus, who was once again sitting down, sipping on a Mountain Dew. I must say, I'm rather surprised that you did that, Dionysus. Dionysus fed, I have a feeling that demigod will be a lot more important than any of us can ever fathom. Aside from that, he looked like he could already handle himself, which is rare for a new camper. You know, I get the feeling that things are about to start changing around here. Well, I've gotten a report from Grover Underwood that he may have found a powerful demigod in New York. I'm having him go to school with a child next year, but if his report is accurate, it may mean that I'll have to go and see this child for myself. Mr. D groaned, which means that I'll be in charge of the camp for an entire year. Great. Tyron chuckled, it isn't that bad. Besides, Luke can help you out with most of the stuff that I do. The god leaned back in his chair, I suppose so. At the very least it will be an interesting year. That it will, Dionysus. That it will. Ch.6. Time to catch up. It could easily be said that, in the morning at least, Camp Half-Blood was just like any other camp. It was generally quiet. Birds sang sweet morning songs in the spring and summer, while the harsh cold air howled through the brisk morning sun in the fall and winter. It was like this every morning, and, if one woke up early enough, they could see a young man with hair the color of the sun's brightest rays, running alongside a similarly haired, though more salt and pepperish and taller young man. Come on fish cake. One of the young men yelled as he pulled ahead of the other, wouldn't want to have me beat you again, would you? The aforementioned fish cake gained a burst of speed and matched his fellow blonde. Wouldn't dream of it, Luke. Luke and Naruto had become fast friends after that first day. After Luke had shown Naruto around camp and showed him to cabin 12, he'd taken Naruto to go and get his weapons back from storage. He'd made the mistake of asking Naruto if he knew how to use his sword after staring at it for a little while, which led the blonde to challenge the sword master of the camp to a duel in the arena. Luke thought it would be an easy win that day. He was at Naruto's mercy within 7 strikes. Deeming it a fluke, he requested a rematch. He lost again. The third match, he went at Naruto with everything he had. He barely won that match, even though he was going all out. He later determined that it wasn't the fact that Naruto was an exceptional swordsman, but his style was totally different than that which the Greek was used to. Of course, since then he'd won more matches than he lost, but none of the other campers had managed to match Naruto in combat. He just seemed too random. However, it was even worse when Naruto met the Stoll brothers from Cabin 11. They'd started a prank war that had lasted the better part of a month and affected the entire camp. It got to the point that Mr. D was forced to retreat to Olympus, while the other campers were at the mercy of the miniature war that had taken the camp. The Hephaestus cabin was still trying to get rid of the squeaky noise that was on their hammers and screwdrivers almost a year after the war had ended. Both runners gave one last sprint before arriving at the arena before stopping to catch their breath. Luke smirked while panting lightly, I think that was a Thai fish cake. Naruto nodded while taking in big gulps of air, yeah, but I'll get you next time. Both quickly regained their breath before smirking at each other and grabbing the short swords that Luke had left in the arena the night before. So what are the rules today, Luke? Hand to hand. Upper body strikes only. First to draw blood. Naruto asked casually as he flipped his short sword around in his hand. Luke smirked, actually, I was thinking more along the lines of Greek style only. No fancy kenjutsu, no staff tricks, just straight up what I've taught you. Naruto's confident smirk fell, come on man, you know that's my worst subject. Which is exactly why we're doing this. So, we can either do this now, or we can wait until the others catch up and they can watch you get beaten. Naruto sighed, fine, let's get this over with. Wouldn't want the class to see their co-instructor get his ass kicked right before he teaches them how to fight. That'd just be humiliating. Luke laughed and took up a fighting stance with his sword in front of him, alright then. Let's dance. Naruto put his left arm in front of him as if he were holding a shield and his right arm just above it with the blade facing toward Luke. He lunged towards his fellow blonde, who met his blade halfway and pushed him back before jabbing at him. Naruto countered, bringing his blade upward with Luke's and using his left forearm like a shield to get behind the older blonde. He lunged forward again, attempting a blindside jab, but his blade was met by Luke's, who used his superior height to his advantage and performed a counter jab aimed at disarming the shorter blonde. Naruto countered with his left forearm and rolled backwards. Good. Luke said laughingly, you've actually been paying attention. I was expecting to be able to get you with that last move. Naruto smirked, you've tried that move with me so many times I'm pretty sure I could block it in my sleep. Luke smiled, is that so? Well then, I should use something that you haven't seen before. Luke charged at the younger blonde, forcing Naruto onto the defensive. The older blonde made several jabs, which Naruto dodged, before swinging his sword at an upward angle. Naruto tried to block, but his sword was still to his right after the last parry. He used his left arm to make the strike go higher than intended and brought up his own sword to attack. Before he could though, Luke flipped his sword in his hand and used the newfound angle to make a downward strike toward Naruto's sword arm. Eddie had his katana, he would have been able to block, but he wasn't used to using short swords in combat. His sword clattered out of his hand and onto the stony ground of the arena. "Well, looks like I win again," Luke said with a smirk as he flipped his sword around in the air. "Ah, shut up. You just wait until I get to choose the fight and we'll see how well you do in staff-based combat," Naruto said as he gathered his lost sword. A few seconds thereafter, the first of the duo's students ran down the path to the arena before coming to a stop just in front of the entrance. "Geez. What the hell is wrong with you two? How the hell are you so fast?" she yelled as she caught her breath. Luke chuckled, "Well, you know it's in my blood, considering my parentage. Not sure about Naruto though, I think he just has too much energy. So where are the others, Annie?" Annabeth sighed as she tried to get her hair back into shape. "Well, Castor and Pollux were just behind me, I lost sight of Clarice a while ago, Charles was just behind her, and Connor and Travis are bring up the rear I think." Luke nodded, "Well, now that you're here, you can practice some jabs. Come on." Annabeth just groaned, but followed Luke towards a corner of the arena nonetheless and began practicing jabs with her knife. A few minutes went by, but finally Castor and Pollux showed up, hurtling toward Naruto with no apparent intention of stopping. The blonde champion just laughed at the sight of the two brothers trying to outdo one another, but his laughter quickly turned to horror as they barreled into him. "Whoops. Sorry, little bro," they both said in unison as they stood up and offered hands to their blonde cabin mate, who took both offered hands and hoisted himself up. Naruto sighed, "Don't worry about it. And by the way, you both owe me a soda." The day that Naruto had met the brothers had been rather interesting, as Naruto had been relaxing in the formerly unoccupied bunk in cabin 12. They'd tried to call down curses of madness from their father at the other blonde, but as they didn't really work, they'd tried to stab the intruding blonde with exceedingly sharp swords. The attempted violence was eventually assuaged by Dionysus himself, who sensed all of the commotion as soon as it began. It was during this commotion that Naruto noticed their tendency to say the same thing at the same time, and so he got as many drinks out of the two as he could. After that though, they'd accepted him as a younger brother in all but blood and was made easier by the fact that they were all blonde and the brothers had violet eyes in comparison to Naruto's crystal blue. They were athletic like Naruto, but that was mainly because they enjoyed working with plants and farming. However, they both liked a good challenge, and so they joined in on their younger brother's morning routine with Luke, which, with their assistance, quickly became an elite training class. "So what's on the agenda today, little bro? Some sword training? Staff spinning? Tactics and recon?" Pollux asked with a smile. Naruto smiled in return, "I was thinking on working with your sword arms today. Would you rather use short swords or katanas?" The brothers looked at each other and smirked, before looking back at their adoptive younger brother with looks on their faces akin to really. Naruto chuckled, "Katanas it is then. Well, come on you two. Those katas aren't going to practice themselves." The brothers had taken up sparring with katanas after they saw Naruto practicing with his. Although they were already great swordsmen, they were always looking for new challenges. For them, that challenge presented itself in learning how to use a katana. Seeing as they were year-rounders like Naruto was, they'd picked up quite a few tricks from their younger cabin mate. It had gotten to the point where they were able to spar with each other comfortably without Naruto having to intervene much, he just corrected their stances when it was necessary, although they still weren't allowed to use real katanas. However, they were allowed to use dulled metal katanas, simply because they were already used to using real swords. After a few minutes of instructing the twins, the remaining members of their little training group began to show up. Clarice was running in what would otherwise be considered military fashion, which made it rather interesting that she was one of the latter to show up. However, the frayed state of her hair said that she tried to take a shorter route but ended up getting lost. She was eager to join any training group that tested her mettle as a fighter, and aside from that she'd lost a game of capture the flag because of the younger instructor who had cut her old spear in half. She'd gotten a gift from her father in exchange though, so she didn't hold a grudge. Behind her trailed the lumbering form of Charles Beekendorf, who like his father, didn't really care for running, but had joined because Naruto had stopped by one day and requested several weapons of Japanese origin. Having never done anything other than weapons of Greek origin, he took it upon himself to learn as much as he could about Naruto's weaponry choice. This led him to inevitably being in their morning training group. Just behind him were the fighting forms of the Stoll brothers, who had joined the group on the urging of their older brother, but also in part because they decisively lost the prank war. Seeing that their little group was all there, both Naruto and Luke stopped their individual lessons and motioned everyone together. "Alright then," Luke began, "seeing as we've got a capture the flag game coming up, I think that today we should split into groups based on our teams. There won't be any actual training for the next few days, up until the game. So it'll be an Annabeth going over strategy for our side, while the rest of you go over strategies for your own team. Sound good?" The gathered campers nodded and the two teams separated, with Luke, Annabeth, and the Stoll brothers leaving the arena while Clarice, Charles, Pollux, Castor, and Naruto remained behind. After the others' group was out of earshot, Clarice started laughing. "Why are we even doing this? It's obvious that we're going to win." Naruto sighed along with his brothers and the giant of the Hephaestus cabin. "We're doing this because we need a strategy to beat them. They have the numbers, and half of our team will just be standing there, not really doing much." Clarice huffed, "Well then, Mr. Samurai, do you have a master plan?" Naruto smirked at her words, which were dripping with sarcasm, but in fact he did have a plan. "Well, seeing as you asked, I think that the best plan would be to use your cabin along with the heavy hitters in Hephaestus to take on the bulk of their forces and act as a very big distraction. I can probably slip past what remains of their lines easy enough, while Pollux, Castor, and the other cabins can be on guard duty." Clarice scrunched up her face in a combination of thought and frustration, likely at being showed up. "Well, that isn't actually a bad plan, Samurai. But you do realize that you're not getting of the credit for this, right?" Naruto just sighed and nodded. "Cool. I'll talk to the other cabins at dinner tonight. We'll go over tactics later though, after I've filled in the whole team, alright?" The group nodded collectively and began to disperse with various see you laters until it was just Naruto and Charles. As Naruto turned to leave, his arm was tapped lightly by the child of Hephaestus. "Hey man, what's up?" Naruto asked. Beekendorf chuckled, "Well, you asked me for some weird-looking knives and some Japanese shuriken made out of celestial bronze. I have a few prototypes ready for you to look at, but I still don't have your full sets done." Naruto smiled, "That's fine. Let's see what you've got." Beekendorf pulled out a celestial bronze kunai out of his cargo pants pocket and an 8-bladed shuriken out of his back pocket. Both glimmered in the morning sun and looked deadly sharp. The kunai was modeled after the ones that made his father famous, although these were made in a similar fashion to rapiers than to just stick in the ground. While his father's had been 3-pronged during the Third Great Ninja War, they'd been designed to be exceedingly hard to remove from any substance, but in particular rock. Naruto's were similarly designed, but they were more designed to catch an opponent's blade and disarm them, rather than just get stuck in them. As for the unique design of the shuriken, from what Naruto had seen in the scrolls that he was still going through from the old man, that the 8-bladed shuriken had been a tool used during the Warring Clan period, but had been lost to time as 4-bladed shuriken were easier to use. Although shuriken were hard to master in the first place, the 8-bladed shuriken were nigh impossible to use, as they needed to be thrown much faster in order to cut anything. However, they certainly had better results. If thrown correctly, according to the scrolls, the blades cut so finely that the wound would take much longer to heal, and they could also saw through bone. For the best throwers, not even trees could stop the blades. They'd just saw through them. Of course, Naruto knew that he was far from the level needed to even think about doing anything like that, which was why he'd also asked the son of Hephaestus to make a hand-based compressed air cannon capable of launching the shuriken at the speed required until he was able to do it himself. The cabin had wholeheartedly taken on the challenge, but they were still working on the shrinking of the air cannon to match the appropriate speed that Naruto had described. "I just finished those yesterday." Charles began. "It was remarkably simple to make the knife, but the ninja star took some work. Do you know how hard it is to get each of those blades sharpened on the inside curve? And the outside was just as difficult." Naruto looked up questioningly from the blades. "So are you telling me that you won't be able to make more of these?" "What? No, it took me some time to figure it out, but I think I've got it. These should be done by the day after the capture the flag game." Naruto nodded, "Thanks, but what about your payment?" Beekendorf shook his head, "Don't worry about it right now. Consider these your welcome to camp gift, although they're about a year late, but the entire cabin is working on that air cannon of yours. That we will need payment for, but we'll discuss it later." Naruto nodded in understanding and handed back the glimmering bronze weapons, which Beekendorf stuffed back in his massive pockets. "Thanks man," Beekendorf said with a smile as he started to walk away. "Well, I'll see you at lunch. Go do whatever you do during the day." Naruto smiled and quipped to see ya man before turning on his heel and bounding back into the forest. He'd been to camp a year by now, marked by his own year bead, and, although it took him some time, he'd found a little patch of forest where he could practice his jutsu without being disturbed or almost harming a nymph or dryad. The little section of forest he'd found seemed blessed by nature, but oddly enough didn't have any spirits watching over it. Bounding over a small hill, he stopped on the overlook of his little training ground. The top of the hill was, by and large, the best view of the grounds that Naruto had yet seen. The entire area was flat, with a canopy of tall trees that blocked out the sky if one looked from above, save for small patches of uncovered areas that weren't covered by the swaying branches and leaves. The area was still well lit by the sun though, as the only tress in the area happened to be willow trees, fed by a small stream that ran through the center of the grounds, which came from a small waterfall with a pool underneath it that streamed from the hill, the rocky outcropping that protruded from the hill that he was standing on. The water was always warm, even in the winter, because it happened to rest on a natural hot spring. But the best part about it was that it was secluded. Not once, since Naruto had discovered it, had anyone else stumbled onto the grounds. He had, at one point, considered that it was odd, but he didn't want to ask anyone, seeing as they'd probably bring more campers to his training ground and thus disturb his training. So he kept quiet about it, and besides, he'd heard of weirder things than an apparently abandoned area just outside of a camp for half-gods. Actually, that sounded pretty weird, but no one said anything about it to him, so he figured that it was fine. But it was at moments like this when he could actually relax. Staring at the glimmer of the morning sun on the waterfall and the morning dew on the leaves of the willow trees. He smiled as he walked over to the head of the waterfall and dropped over the edge, falling into the warm waters below. He held his breath for as long as he could before resurfacing and clambering onto the shoreline. Of course, he felt about 10 pounds heavier than normal because he was still wearing his clothes when he jumped in, but he quickly dried himself off as a gust of wind that had been rolling through wrapped itself around him, which he caught using his skill in wind manipulation and made into a natural blow dryer. He had managed to go much further into his elemental training, although he'd just barely managed to cut the waterfall with clones within the last week. That wasn't what Naruto wanted though, he wanted to be able to do it himself so that he could turn it into a combat asset that he could utilize if the situation was dire enough. So that was about half of his plan for the day. The other half was to work on his water manipulation training. Thus far, he'd managed to draw water from a leaf, but he still couldn't stop the flow of the stream by utilizing nothing but water manipulation. He would either do that or learn a new jutsu from the scrolls. Within the last year at camp, he'd managed to basically learn every C and B rank wind jutsu from the scroll and a couple of the A ranks, as well as an S rank or at least the theories behind them. Although he knew he could likely perform them all because of his massive chakra reserves, the problem was that he had very little control over high-power jutsu still, due to those overly large reserves. The S-rank jutsu he'd learned didn't require any control whatsoever and pretty much just destroyed everything based on the amount of power the user put behind it, though the scroll said that the jutsu was unfinished. Still, it was easy to perform, although Naruto had no wish to destroy his serene training ground, so he hadn't done it yet. The other jutsu he'd learned he had enough control to perform effectively though, including Futen, Daytopia and Futen. Kamikaze, the two most powerful A-rank jutsu that he had the capability to learn. Daytopia was only considered A-rank for him because the amount of chakra he put into it was capable of creating an 80-mile-per-hour gust. But today he also had a deadline. Annabeth had basically forced him into going to Greek class, namely as recompense for a prank he pulled on her that forced her to wear her invisibility hat all day and only taking it off the next morning. He thought it was funny, but she really didn't and got revenge by forcing him to take her Greek class again. Of course, that just made him join the other team for Capture the Flag, so they were at an impasse. Sighing, he just shook his head at his friend's antics and began trying to cut the waterfall in half again. 5 hours later and Naruto was bored out of his mind. He felt like banging his head on his desk after going over a language that he really couldn't understand. Most demigods could read Greek straight off the bat, but he couldn't, probably because he wasn't a demigod, he was a demi-titan. He could understand the language well enough, but he couldn't read it to save his life. But thankfully, that part of Annabeth's teaching was over. Now all he had to do was deal with was a bit of ancient Greek history and he could go back to his bunk and crash for the day. He sighed in exasperation as another article was plopped in front of him called The History of the Greek World with the E's in the form of deltas. His only thought was seriously. So, now we come to the last part of our lesson, Annabeth quipped cheerfully to Naruto and the other 3 campers in the class, the history of the Greek world. We'll start with the birth of the gods. Anyone care to share how the gods came to be? The kid responded, Kronos ate them, and then Zeus was pretty much a badass and kicked his ass, right? Annabeth sighed, not noticing Naruto flinch at the jab about his secret father, well putting it rather bluntly, yes, that's accurate. Although some gods are not descended from any of the descendants of those involved in the Titan War, as a general rule that's true. The big 3 though are all sons of Kronos, as are Demeter, Hera and Hestia, and all of them fought against the Titans. There were also some Titans that sided with the gods during the war, though most have been detained or have disappeared from the common knowledge of the gods. Naruto, who was somewhat interested in the history of the Titan War, quickly fell into his own musings as Annie began to delve into the history of the big 3, mentioning Athena every so often for good measure. But Naruto's mind stayed glued onto the fact that some of the Titans had supported the gods in the war. I wonder if I were able to find one of the titans that supported the gods during the war, if they'd be able to tell me what happened to make Dad go berserk. Since his uncle had told him that the titans that fought in the war didn't remember much afterwards, he'd mused several times on what exactly had made them act the way they did. From what he knew of his father from his uncle, he wasn't the kind of guy to be afraid of his children usurping him, but rather was actually looking forwards to being a father. What had Gaia done to change that? It was definitely something he needed to look into if he was going to be fighting against her somewhat effectively. He quickly broke from his thoughts when he realized that he'd been staring out the window so long that the rest of his campmates had already filed out of the class and were on to whatever cabins they were assigned to, leaving only him and Annabeth in the room. Annabeth sighed as he regained awareness of his surroundings and focused on her once more. "Seriously?" she asked with a deadpan stare, "are my classes really that boring to you?" Naruto just scratched the back of his head and laughed nervously, "Not really, I just don't understand half of what you're saying." "Still having problems with Greek?" "You could say that." Annabeth shook her head, "Seriously, I don't really understand how it's such a problem, you should really try to help yourself with it, I can tutor you privately if you'd like." Naruto smiled, "I think I'll take you up on that, although can I please be done with this class?" Annabeth laughed, "Sure, yeah, why not? Just don't play another prank on me anytime soon, okay?" "Thank you, thank you, thank you," Naruto said, bounding up and down before gripping Annabeth in a bear hug. "And breathe." Sorry," Naruto said as he dropped his fellow blonde. Annabeth smirked, "Well, I do believe you owe me for basically chalking me half to death." Naruto sighed, "Let me guess, 2 cappuccino lattes with extra caffeine. You know me so well." Naruto smiled and snapped his fingers and, counting a short blessing to his patron god in his head, made 2 lattes appear out of thin air. He grabbed one as it floated into his hand, while Annie made for the other one. "Thanks Naruto," she said after taking a long drink of her personal favorite drink, "come find me later for tutoring, okay?" "Sure Annie," he said as he turned to leave, "whatever you say. Jana." Annabeth sighed and yelled after Naruto, who was already out the door, "I still don't know what that means." Naruto just laughed as he ran to the big house. He'd heard earlier that Chiron had gotten back from his year-long solo sojourn to check up on the possible demigod. He was eager to see his half-horse mentor again and maybe get himself out of chores for the next year in a game of pinochle. As he approached, he noticed that it was unusually quiet for the big house. Usually Dionysus was either throwing a party, playing a loud game of pinochle, or yelling about how he couldn't have his 39 Savian Blanc. He had at least expected a game of pinochle to be being played, but once he reached the outdoor game table, neither Dionysus nor Chiron were to be found. Naruto was about to go back to the center of the camp, but he saw someone moving by the window. Naruto sighed and then moved towards the door. He was going to open the door and see if Chiron was in there, but before he could, he heard Dionysus begin to speak. "Zeus isn't at all pleased right now. You know that. Every search he's attempted for the bolt has come up with naught, and now that you've come back, it's even worse. If your suspicions are correct, he'll do his damnedest to kill the boy. And if that's true, then Deadhead might try and capture him for leverage on Poseidon. I know the longer the bolt is missing, the closer we get to an all-out war. I would have had the boy moved here, but his mother insisted. The best I can do is keep Grover near him. Enough of this though, I just got off the bus from Manhattan and I haven't been able to stretch my legs for a year. Besides, I do believe we have a guest." Naruto took this as his hint to enter. Dionysus looked rather tired and Chiron, who was indeed back, was flexing his legs as if he hadn't used them in a while, which Naruto guessed he hadn't. They were both looking at Naruto intently, which made the young blonde nervous. "Hey Chiron, you're back," Naruto said whilst scratching the back of his head. "Indeed it would, Naruto. However, I am curious as to how long you've been standing there." Not long really. Just heard something about you having just gotten back and then inviting me in, I think." Chiron's expression relaxed visibly, "Is that so? Well, as a matter of fact, I did just return from my year-long trip to Manhattan. I would like to catch up with you, but I need to take a run to work out the kinks in my legs, and then I think I'll take a really long nap. Perhaps tomorrow. Before the Capture the Flag tournament. Sounds good to me, sensei. Enjoy your nap. See ya." As soon as Naruto had left, Dionysus turned to Chiron, who was watching after Naruto as he ran back down the mess hall for dinner. "You know, he's lying." Chiron smiled, "Yes, I do. He's too honest for his own good, even if he's trying not to be. Still, I think he'd much rather think about the information that he's been given than talk to anyone about it. I trust him." "Well, so do I, although right now we're both going to get our asses kicked if Zeus finds out." Chiron shrugged, "Oh well, but just so you know, I was serious about the nap." Dionysus eyed, "Great. One more day in charge of these brats. Damn it all." Chiron just laughed. X. That night, Naruto had a more vivid dream than usual. It was storming on a beach and two animals, a white horse and a golden eagle, were trying to kill each other at the edge of the surf. The eagle swooped down and slashed the horse's muzzle with its huge talons. The horse reared up and kicked at the eagle's wings. As they fought, the ground rumbled and a monstrous voice chuckled somewhere beneath the earth, goading the animals to fight harder. The boy ran toward them, but he couldn't reach them. Then the eagle went in for the kill and the boy disappeared, but the once ominous voice boomed once more, gentler now, and startled the eagle and the horse both. It startled the dreaming blonde as well, as the voice had come from his mouth this time. A third animal, a dog, joined them on the surf and all three began to stare where Naruto was standing. All three began to charge at him and, although Naruto felt he should run, he could not. Just as they were about to reach him, they stopped once more. Naruto felt hands on both of his shoulders. From what he could see, to his left was a man draped in black robes, with an old wizened face, but as he looked to his right, he only was able to see one thing. Hair as bright as the morning sun. But something seemed amiss with the man. It was as if there was a blackness, a sunspot if you will, in his light. Then the area glowed in a bright light and then everything faded to black. The next thing he knew, he was being shaken awake by his brother, although he couldn't tell which one it was far too dark in the cabin. "Hey little bro, come quick. There's some kind of commotion going on outside." Then whoever it was that woke him up went through the front door and into the commons. Naruto, who was still in his pajamas, jumped out of bed, grabbed his katana, and ran outside. Both of his brothers were standing outside, as well as a few members of the Athena cabin and the Ares cabin, standing in the rain. Castor nodded toward the big hill when he heard Naruto come up. "I told Pollux to get you up. There's some kind of commotion going on the other side of the hill. Annabeth has gone to the big house to get Chiron and maybe Dad up. To make matters worse, Zeus seems to be in a bad mood tonight." Naruto nodded, "Alright, tell everyone to stay back for the meantime, I'll head to the top of the hill until Chiron or Dionysus or Luke gets there and hold down the fort." Castor nodded and Naruto ran through the rain to the top of the hill. He got to the top just in time to see a monster, which he could barely identify as a minotaur, dissipate into golden dust. A boy, his age from what he could see from the light from the gold, sprawled out on the ground, holding what looked like a horn. There was also another person, possibly a satyr, passed out on the ground a few feet away. Then the light faded and the storm stopped. The boy, who Naruto could barely see, managed to stumble back towards his friend. Annabeth came up behind him, as did Chiron. By the time that they reached them, the boy had managed to pick his friend up but was staggering. "You alright kid?" Naruto asked as he approached. The boy just looked at Naruto, then at Annabeth, and fainted straight away. Naruto sighed, "Well that's just great. Hey Chiron, who's the satyr?" Chiron stooped down and picked up the fainted satyr, who was mumbling something about food and tin cans, and hoisted him onto his back. "If I'm not mistaken, this here is Grover Underwood. Which means that the boy is the charge that I've been looking after. This is Percy Jackson." Naruto shrugged, "Well, he's decent in a fight I guess, but there must be something else about him that made you take a personal interest. I'm sure he's a great guy and all, and I'd love to help more, but I've got to send everyone back to bed if you two will be looking after those two. And it's 1 in the morning. And I'm cold, wet, and exhausted. I'm hitting the hay. Night y'all." Naruto trudged back down the hill, with Chiron chuckling to himself as he went. By the time he'd gotten everyone back to bed and then managed to get back to his own cabin, Chiron and Annabeth had gotten Grover and Percy to the big house and were probably treating them. Finally back in bed, Naruto drifted off, thinking about the arrival of the new camper, but more about the dream he'd had. Despite that, he fell asleep within minutes and didn't have any more dreams that night. Ch.7. Dance with the Devil's Dog. For the life of him, Naruto couldn't figure it all out. For the past week, the newcomer to the camp had been in an almost comatose state, slipping in and out of consciousness. He'd been in the infirmary to check up on the kid and Annabeth, who had somehow been assigned to taking care of both him and the satyr, Grover. Evidently he'd been in and out of consciousness a few times, but not once had he managed to stay awake for more than a few minutes. But the new guy wasn't what was troubling the young blonde demi-titan. He sighed as he leant back on the trunk of the tree he was on top of, looking out over the camp. Nothing seemed remiss from where he was sitting. The camp was as it usually was, with various campers tending the strawberry fields, playing volleyball, canoeing, or just what they did on a normal day. Beekendorf was at the smithy, Mr. D and Chiron were playing their little games on the porch with Annabeth, Castor and Pollux were out tending to the fields, and Clarice was trying to pick a fight with everyone she saw. Naruto smiled before a breeze came rippling across the valley. Well, it might have been soothing to some, from where he was sitting, it felt like a gust. The tree he was on swayed gently. "I guess this is what people mean when they say the winds of change are coming, huh?" he said as he stood, looking out to the camp. Ever since that day, when the new camper arrived, Naruto hadn't been able to stop thinking about his dream or what he'd overheard. He hadn't told anyone, of course, but he knew that it'd get out at some point whether they wanted it to or not. He couldn't help but feel they were connected, though. And the old man, who was behind him in the dream, he seemed familiar, but no one in his memory seemed quite like him. Still, it wouldn't be long until all of this came to a head. He knew that much. From what he knew of the gods, they were anything but patient, especially the big three. That had been the one thing he'd been able to figure out about his dreams. Poseidon and Zeus were fighting, and it was getting bad. He also knew that the new guy was somehow in the center of all of this. He sighed again as the wind blew once more, harder this time, as to make ripples on the grass of the hills of the camp. By the time it had stopped, he had disappeared, leaving nothing but a trace in the wind. Walking back toward the big house, he noticed Chiron standing next to the kid who'd been out for a few days, in front of cabin 11. So he's being given over to the Hermes' cabin already? Naruto thought, I wonder how long he's been up. Changing his route, he headed toward the archery range to meet up with Chiron. S plus or minus dot 1/4 a acute plus or minus a tilde plus or minus a circumflex 1, Chiron. Is the new guy up yet? The old teacher stopped in front of the gate to the archery range and sighed, good morning to you too Naruto, and yes, Percy is up. I don't suppose you know where my class is, do you? Naruto smiled, I'm pretty sure that you don't have a class for another 15 minutes. Oh, is that right? The old centaur smiled, it would seem that my timing is off then. Naruto smiled and then got serious, sensei, what's going on? The weather has been rather odd lately, and now the new guy, Percy, shows up in the middle of a storm, bringing monsters to the edge of the camp for the first time in years. Something is wrong. Chiron frowned, I think you already know what's wrong Naruto. I know you overheard me and Dionysus discussing it the other day. Naruto shook his head, I only heard the end of it and that was hardly enough to know that something was wrong. The only thing I know for certain is that Zeus and Poseidon are having some sort of spat. The change in the weather is enough to see that. Chiron's hand clenched on his bow, then that's all you need to know right now. I know you haven't told any other campers and it needs to stay that way until I say so. Swear to me that you won't say a word. Slightly taken aback at the seriousness of Chiron's voice, he could only wonder how bad this actually was. I swear to you, Chiron, that no one shall hear a word from my lips on the matter. Chiron eased up a bit, thank you Naruto, although I'm surprised you didn't swear on the sticks. Naruto chuckled, sorry sensei, but I'd rather have the responsibility to make my own promises and to keep them than to rely on some supernatural power that makes me keep them. Haha. Chiron laughed, sometimes it amazes me how grown up you sound, despite your age. Naruto's cheeks burned crimson from the praise, thank you sensei, but if that's all, then I'd like to go and see the new guy for myself. Of course, my dear boy, but before you go, I have a request to make of you. Chiron's face got serious again. If at all possible, I'd like you to keep an eye on Mr. Jackson. I fear that if my suspicions are right, there may be some elements that might act against him in the near future, and you are the second best fighter in the camp. Naruto nodded, what do you want me to do, then? I could try and switch teams for capture the flag, but that's all that I can think of. Chiron hummed and thought, actually, that's a great idea, Naruto. Switching teams would make things easier as a whole. Naruto smiled and turned back down the path to the rest of the camp, I'm sure I'll find a way sensei for now though, I should probably just start with finding him. I'll see you later sensei. Giving a small wave over his shoulder as he walked away. Now then the blonde thought as he wandered toward cabin 11, how in Hades am I going to get Claris to let me switch teams? I'm going to need a damn good excuse, especially since I came up with the strategy she's using. And then, like a gift from God or one of the gods, the girl's bathroom exploded. It wasn't a fiery explosion or anything. It was more like every pipe in the bathroom had spontaneously decided to burst at once. Great, now what is it? He thought as he stared toward the now muddy ground in front of the bathrooms. Then, all of a sudden, the bathroom exploded once more and flying out came none other than Claris, as well as some other Ares campers, who all appeared to be soaked to the bone until they hit the mud. Only seconds later, an equally soaked Annabeth stepped out of the restroom, followed by the new kid, Jackson, who was completely dry. Naruto chuckled as he watched and began walking over to the scene. Well, at least this saves me some time. You're dead, new boy. You're totally dead. Claris said angrily to the two. The new guy just glared back, you want to gargle with toilet water again Claris? Close your mouth. He said. Oh, he should not have said that Naruto mused. And, he was right. The other Ares campers were trying to hold her back, but they slipped and fell into the mud, while Claris moved toward the new kid with her fist clenched, ready to knock some sense into him. Before she could get to him though, the blonde ninja had stepped into the way, blocking her path. Enough, Claris. He said, arms crossed over his chest. The new kid won this little bout. If you really feel that bad about it, why don't you just beat some sense into him and capture the flag? Claris just snorted. Stay out of this, Naruto. This is none of your business. Why don't you just go make some sushi or something? Naruto just smiled at the jab. Look, as much as I'd like to, there's still no reason for you to. Shut up 0 superscript 1 I circumflex a umlaut dot a, or I'll beat you down to get to him. Naruto sighed. Well, if that's how you feel, I guess I have no choice but to change teams for capture the flag. Claris lowered her guard to that. Ha, don't make me laugh, samurai, your entire cabin would have to change sides, and we already made a deal. Naruto nodded. That's right, you made it with cabin 12, the sons of Dionysus. Claris smiled smugly, but I'm just Dionysus's champion, which means while I am a part of cabin 12, I'm still unclaimed, which means. You can side with cabin 11. Annabeth exclaimed excitedly. Yep. Which I'm now going to do because of this entire mess. Claris shook with rage, but stepped back. Fine, Uzumaki. But now, I'm going to make a point of crushing you in the next match. Naruto smirked. I'm looking forward to seeing you try. Claris just growled, before turning around and stomping off towards cabin 5, her two comrades in tow. Naruto just smiled as he watched her go. He knew that he would get in deep trouble with his cabin mates for pulling the switch, but they'd wanted to fight him anyways, so there was that, and Claris would come up with a new strategy for the team with no trouble, though he surmised that it might be a lot more straightforward than the one he came up with. Well, that takes care of that. He thought to himself, that was a lot easier than it would have been without the new guy. Speaking of. Ugh, what on earth is that smell, Annie? He said, turning to the girl who was still soaking wet. Were you standing next to the toilet or something? She just cracked a smile. Nah, I was by the showers. What you smell is probably Claris and the Ares guys. Or it might just be the Ares cabin as a whole. I can't really tell. Hahaha. Naruto laughed. You're right, I can't really tell either. After sharing a laugh at the expense of the Ares cabin, the blondes turned toward the new guy, Jackson, who was still looking rather bewildered, maybe at having made the toilets explode. I didn't need your help, you know. He said with confusion. Naruto just shrugged. I know you didn't. That much was clear, but you did just blow up the bathroom, I think, and the harpies and nymphs are already going to freak out about this. Jackson looked down at his feet. Sorry about that, I don't know. Naruto just slapped him on the shoulder. It's fine, man. They'll take care of it later. He sighed, so no need to worry or anything. The newcomer nodded, then looked at Annabeth, who was staring at the two of them. Hey, Annie. What's with the look? Oh, it's nothing, she said, but with you both on our team, we're definitely going to win. Win what? Naruto smiled. We have a capture the flag tournament coming up, and I'm pretty sure you just got recruited into Annie's team. The new kid groaned. Great, not even a day, and I've already pissed someone off. Naruto just clapped him on the back. I wouldn't take it too personally, the Ares cabin is just generally like that, by the way. I don't think we've been properly introduced yet. He extended his hand. Naruto Uzumaki, future Hokage and prankster extraordinaire. The new guy looked at him strangely, but took the offered hand. Percy Jackson. You don't seem like most of the other campers I've seen. Naruto laughed. You'd be right. I'm from Japan. I'm looking forward to having you on my team, Percy. Percy just shrugged. Thanks. Naruto just smiled in return and turned to Annabeth. So, should I take over the tour so you can change, or? Annabeth shook her head. I'll finish up. The route basically goes to my next class anyways. Naruto smiled. Okay then. I guess I'll see you at dinner then. It was nice to meet you, Percy. I hope that we can become good friends. Huh? Annabeth chuckled. Sorry, language barrier. He's basically saying welcome to camp. Percy shrugged. Alright, I'll see you later too then. Naruto nodded and turned away from the two, ignoring the strange looks on some of the campers' faces who were still staring at Percy or the bathroom. He had become the lord of the toilets. After going to Chiron to report the incident with the bathroom and subsequently getting involved in a game of pinochle with Chiron and Dionysus and winning, much to Dionysus's dismay, Naruto wandered back to his little section of the forest. Having nothing else to do for the day, at least until dinner, he decided to try to learn some more jutsu, but the chakra control required for the new techniques was something he just didn't have yet. He didn't want to work on his elemental training for a little while, having made very little progress by himself the other day and not really feeling up to trying it again. He was, therefore, sitting on a stump, working on his handwriting for seals. Ugh, this is so tedious, he said to himself as he made another stroke on the paper in front of him. Each stroke had to be perfect or it would result in a completely different seal. Right now, he was busy working on a barrier seal, or at least a toned-down version of one, that would be able to deal with moderate electrical attacks and disperse it into the ground. Ideally though, the complete version of it would be able to redirect any electricity that was sent at him and redirect it into his own attack, like Raiden. Ryu, sending it back at them twofold. Working on this seal wouldn't exactly be something he would usually do, but this was something he considered to be important. After all, Claris would be looking to mess him up with her shocky spear. But the final stroke, he finished the last character of the seal. Putting down the brush, he made a quick seal to activate it, causing it to glow for a moment before fading into the paper. Okay, well at least that works, Naruto said with a sigh of relief. Now for the actual test. Pulling his app taser out of his bag, he brought it next to the seal. If it worked, then it would glow a little bit as it dispersed the power into the ground. If it didn't, it should just burn a hole in the paper. Alright, here goes nothing, Naruto said as he activated the taser. At first, the seal seemed to be working as it was intended, as a light glow signaled its work, but very quickly it glowed brighter and subsequently exploded into an electrical storm, zapping Naruto and sending him backwards. Aw. Damn. Ouch. Naruto yelled out as he lay on the ground, convulsing because of the shock. It didn't take long for the tasing to wear off, and he stopped spasming, although his muscles still hurt. Ugh, I really don't want to do that again, he said as he lay there, recuperating from the shock. Is there any particular reason that you decided to wake me up from my nap? A bellowing voice asked from inside Naruto's mindscape. Naruto groaned, sorry Caillou, testing out a new seal. The fox growled, and what seal exactly is designed to wake me up like that? I was trying to make an electricity-absorbing barrier for my inevitable match with Claris, but it ended up shocking me instead. The fox laughed, hahaha. That's the stupidest thing I've heard from you in a while. Ah, shut it, furball. What did you call me, Gaki? Naruto sighed. He and the fox had established a weird relationship after that day. They didn't talk too terribly often, but when they did, it was often chit-chat about the elemental nations, and more often the shinobi that came before the foundation of the great villages. The fox was imprisoned by the first Hokage, but had been around for what many shinobi considered the warring clans period. It was from him that he'd gotten the idea for the new shuriken and the new kunai design. Because of their talking, they'd at least become acquaintances, maybe even friends, although the fox was loath to admit it and still hadn't told Naruto his actual name. Not that Naruto necessarily minded, considering he couldn't exactly go around telling people he had a giant demon that could probably destroy Olympus sealed in his stomach. Still, it was better to have someone to critique his work, if nothing else. The Kyuubi had had to deal with many different ninja before he was sealed and was able to offer at least a little insight into most things. Naruto sat back up and stared at the paper with the seal on it. Well, at least it didn't get fried back to work, I suppose. He began writing the seal again on the paper, making sure the strokes were perfect before he heard the Kyuubi snickering. Is something funny, furball? The fox growled, I thought I told you not to call me that. Yeah, well, you still won't tell me your real name, so until you do, I'm going to call you whatever I like. He heard the fox growl in annoyance, but anyways, what's so funny? I'm surprised you haven't realized it actually, no I'm not. The fox barked out with a laugh. Then do you care to share? Your seal worked, Gaki. It's still on the page, you just weren't using it right. How so? The seal is designed to protect the user from electric attacks, not to act as a shock proffer for a stump. An look made its way across Naruto's face before he planted his face firmly in his hands. Ah, I'm an idiot. The fox barked out a laugh, I'm not going to dispute that. Don't wake me up again unless you're about to die. The link to his mindscape cut out and Naruto hurried to clean the ink off of his sealing paper. After it was as clean as he could get it, he tore the portion that the seal was on off of the roll and wrapped it around his midsection. Well, here goes nothing, he said as he picked up the taser and prepared to zap himself in the stomach. He nervously pulled the trigger and… That's it. He wondered aloud. He'd shut his eyes to brace himself for the pain, but there was none. The taser should be working, but he wasn't feeling anything. He took his finger off the trigger and moved it in front of him, activating it a few times to be sure it was working, watching the electrical jolt between the two conductors. Well I guess that means it works. I should probably start writing this into my armor for capture the flag. Claris is gonna be so pissed, he said with a grin. He pulled a scroll out of his pocket and, making a quick seal, unsealed his personal armor. His pride and joy, he'd made it himself in the Hephaestus forges during his free time. It was designed based off of Elemental Nations Warring Clans period armor, as well as this world's samurai armors. It was made up of a blend of celestial bronze and steel, with a dull orange breastplate and arm and shin guards that covered the forward-facing areas, but not the inside guards. It was designed to be worn with a light mesh shirt so that all vital points were covered. In fact, the only area that had to be worn above his regular clothes was the faceplate or the optional helmet attachment, which Naruto had created specifically for capture the flag. The helmet was designed after this world's old samurai helmets, hence how he got the nickname, while the faceplate looked similar to an Anbu mask from Konoha, but was painted as a fox and had actually had a mouth. Although it finished off the outfit as it was much more colorful than standard Anbu masks, it was also had practical use as illumination seals near the eyes allowed for night vision and combined with the helmet, an awesome intimidation factor. All in all, it wasn't the best outfit for combat for any of the other campers, but was perfect for a ninja fighting against Greek combatants who struck the areas the armor covered and would probably help in fights with other ninja as well, as it allowed for mobility with little issues to movement and little weight due to the combination of the bronze and steel, with more protection than standard Chunin armors, although the helmet wouldn't be much use in his own world. Or, at least, that's what the Kyuubi had told him. It could be totally different by the time he got back. Having written the seal in each respective piece of armor, Naruto sealed everything away and began walking back toward the camp, having heard the horn for dinner be sounded as he was working. It was only a few more minutes until he reached the dining pavilion and quickly fell into line with his 2 cabin mates before grabbing some brisket and 3 rolls, among other things, and waited for the call for a toast. Of course, Dionysus had invited himself to the table, as did Chiron and a few satyrs, but that was pretty normal. Looking around, everything seemed pretty normal. Percy was having trouble though, but that was probably because he was on the edge of the table. He was looking around, still bewildered, not that Naruto could blame him. The toast was called and Naruto cheered to their health as usual with his favorite drink, Orange Crush. The food was passed around to the other tables and everyone got up and dropped food in the fire. Naruto himself offered his rolls up to Dionysus and his brisket to his father, though he couldn't say his name aloud. Dionysus gave the weekly announcements and introduced Percy to everyone, still carrying the tradition of getting new campers' names wrong. After that, everyone filed down to the amphitheater for the campfire, singing and telling stories. Naruto went as well, but his mid was on other things, namely the dream he'd had the night before. Naruto sighed as someone beside him dropped their s'more on the ground, laughing it off as they grabbed another. I hope this can last, Naruto thought to himself, though he had a bad feeling that it wouldn't. Despite his worries, he decided to push his worries aside for the time being and simply enjoy the happy atmosphere. That night, after the campfire, as soon as his head hit his pillow, Naruto's consciousness left him and he slept the sleep of the dead. A few days had passed since Percy had made his debut at camp and most people had begun to see him as just another camper. He had been tested, of course, in a variety of different disciplines to see if the heads of the cabins could glean any information as to who he was descended from, whatever he performed best at. As of yet, however, the tests had been rather inconclusive. Aside from almost hitting Chiron in the flank with an arrow, there had been no definitive events that made Percy stand out over the days, although he was remarkably fast in a canoe. The only reason Naruto was reflecting on any of this was because he was heading to the arena, where he was going to help Luke in teaching Cabin 11's swordplay, which Percy was currently a part of. Unfortunately, the blonde demi-titan had to use a Greek sword, which he still wasn't great with, instead of his regular katana, bow staff, or even a tanto, which meant that his role there was exclusively to act as a dummy for Luke to practice his strikes on. Mumbling to himself about not being some stupid dummy, Naruto arrived at the arena, which was already occupied by the entirety of Cabin 11, with Luke at the front of the class and, after a cursory glance to the class, Percy somewhere in the middle. "Ah. Our assistant instructor has arrived. Now we can begin the lesson," Luke said with a smirk. All Naruto could do was silently groan as he took his stance and proceeded to be beaten up by Luke for the next half hour. Not that he didn't understand why he was doing it, seeing as a live demonstration was always better than just being instructed, but by the gods, why did it have to hurt so much? However, the beating was rather quick and the students quickly began to practice what they saw on the dummies in the arena. Naruto put back the sword he had been using and unsealed his staff, giving it a few swings in the air and a bewildered look from Percy, before turning to Luke. "I think we have time for a bit of practice of own, now," he said with a wild grin. Luke just laughed as he grabbed a shield and adopted a stance. "I was thinking the same thing, samurai." Naruto smirked as he got into his own stance and began orbiting around his opponent. Luke was the one to make the first strike, lunging forward with a downward strike, which Naruto parried of the edge of his staff and used the momentum to overextend Luke's arm before spinning behind him and launching a strike at his left side. Luke blocked barely and shifted his blade into a reverse grip, striking toward Naruto's back. The blonde ninja ducked out of the way before springing up and launching a flurry of kicks and punches at the demigod before bouncing backward off of his opponent's shield, causing Luke to stumble backwards. Capitalizing on his advantage, Naruto jumped back towards Luke, who had just regained his balance, and aimed a strike towards his legs. Luke stepped back just in time and used his shield to pin the bow to the ground for a moment and launched an assault of his own, which Naruto countered with his bare hands, throwing his staff in the air to dislodge it. As soon as Luke lunged toward him, he sidestepped, allowing the blow to pass right by him, but grabbed Luke's arm halfway through the strike and, with a yell of indignation from the older blonde, proceeded to throw him into the arena floor before catching his staff and twirling above his head, more for show than anything practical, as Luke rolled with a throw back to his shield, which he grabbed as he jumped up and resumed his stance. Luke smirked, ready for round 2. Naruto smiled and lowered his guard. Another time, maybe. I'm pretty sure that you need to get back to teaching. Luke dropped his stance and looked around, only to see that all of his students were no longer working on their jabs, but were instead staring at the blondes who had just been fighting. Luke groaned, really, you guys, it shouldn't be so weird to see us sparring, but if you're that interested in it, I guess it's time for everyone to pair up. He looked around at his audience, searching for one face in particular. Percy, seeing as it's your first time, you're with me. Naruto will supervise. Naruto had to suppress a laugh at seeing the newcomer's despondent reaction and quickly turned around to avoid doing just that. Still, the sparring began, but without a partner, the blonde quickly became bored. I'll be right back, Luke, he said with his back still turned, giving a small wave. Luke grunted his ascension as he blocked a faulty strike from Percy, who was still having trouble with his sword. Naruto walked off toward the bathroom, but, in a shady part of the walk, made the sign for his most abused jutsu and began walking toward the forest. Let me know how teaching the class goes and keep an eye on Percy, will ya? The clone nodded and quipped a sure boss. As he started walking back toward the arena. Naruto sighed in relief and happiness as he reached the edge of the forest and took to the trees. He really loved that jutsu. Not that he would have minded staying, but there was a jutsu that he really wanted to work on, and besides, nothing else was going to happen that day. Needless to say, he couldn't have been more wrong. The clone didn't get hit or anything, but he did see Luke get his ass handed to him by Percy, which just kind of randomly happened. It didn't seem like Percy had had any kind of training, but after the break, he managed to execute an advanced technique on the first try, and against Luke no less. Whatever spurt of skill had reared its head though quickly fizzled out, but it looked like he was a natural with a sword, especially considering that the one he had used was unbalanced. Most of the camp had heard about it by the next day, but most people considered it a fluke. Still, Naruto had a feeling that something caused a sudden burst of energy, he just couldn't figure out what. Shaking his head, he knocked on the door of cabin 6 and waited for Annabeth. It was her day off from teaching and she had agreed to tutor him, though he had a feeling that they would just end up chatting over an espresso and for him, a kai. Sure enough, she came out in a hurry and they headed over to a grassy knoll near the big house. Sure enough, they never got to the tutoring and after about half an hour, Naruto began to doubt it ever would. Somehow, they'd gotten on to the topic of capture the flag. So, you're willing to be on guard duty with Percy? I would have thought that you would want to be on the front lines. Naruto chuckled, nah, not this time. You know how good I am at staying hidden and just leaving the new guy to do border patrol just sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. If I see a hole, though, I'll definitely go for the flag or try and help you guys out, okay? Annie shrugged nonchalantly, I don't really care either way. Besides, something about Percy just gets on my nerves. Naruto chalked back a laugh. His uncle had made sure that he knew the birds and the bees and then some. If he wanted to, he could probably teach sex ed, even at his age. So, if what he'd learned was right, then she was probably going to be crushing on him in a few years, maybe even toppling Luke. He made a mental note to start a betting pool on that. So Annie started, are you ready for this evening then? Naruto sprang up, oh yeah. I'm totally ready to kick ass, Dadabeo. He said pumping his fist in the air. What? Naruto scratched the back of his head in embarrassment, sorry. It doesn't really mean anything though, come to think of it, I'm pretty sure that my mom had a similar verbal tic. Oh? You don't really talk much about her, you know. What's she like? Naruto chuckled mirthlessly, I don't really know, she died when I was born. Annabeth was taken aback, Naruto, It's fine Annie. She was a great woman, as I understand it. She was brasher than I am though. Pretty sure Dad was a lot more reserved then. So your father is your godly parent, then? I guess so, yeah. He was getting a little uncomfortable about the way the conversation was going, so he decided to put the shoe on the other foot. So, what about your family? Annabeth got quiet very quickly, it's complicated. Naruto smiled, isn't it always? That cheered her up, good point. He conjured up another serving of kai and espresso. I propose a toast, then. To complicated families and to our parents, bastards that they can be sometimes. Annabeth laughed, I'll drink to that. Their glasses clinked as they looked over the bay and the camp as serene and peaceful as ever. At night, the camp was up in arms, quite literally, as the long-awaited game of capture the flag began. It had been put off for a week due to the arrival of a new camper, and so the campers were very excited to get into the action. Pastor and Pollux, who Naruto ate with, were very excited to be fighting against their surrogate little brother, while Mr. D, when he heard about the change, just fed and went back to trying to get his drink to change to wine from a root beer float, though his attempt was obviously in vain. All through dinner, Clarice was trying to glare a hole through Naruto's head, which he was very perceptive of, but just didn't care. As soon as dinner was over, the tables were cleared and the conch horn sounded out in the night. From opposite ends of the pavilion, the competing cabins, this time Ares and Athena, marched their respective standards into full view of the whole camp. Naruto heard Luke explaining what was going on briefly over the din in the room, most likely to Percy, as he adjusted his arm and shin guards, making sure they wouldn't budge in a fight, and jumped up and down to loosen himself up. Finally, it was time for the main event. Chiron pounded his foot on the marble, and all other voices faded in an instant. "Heroes," he announced. "You know the rules. The creek is the boundary line. The entire forest is fair game. All magic items are allowed. The banner must be prominently displayed and have no more than 2 guards. Prisoners may be disarmed but may not be bound or gagged. No killing or maiming is allowed. I will serve as referee and battlefield medic. Arm yourselves." But that said, he spread his hands and the tables covered themselves with weapons and armor. Naruto smiled and unsealed his own armor at the same time so that people wouldn't get suspicious of his armor just appearing out of nowhere, well, coming from a different nowhere, at least. He quickly put his chest plate over his mesh shirt, which he'd already been wearing, and adjusted it so it wouldn't be easily dislodged before putting his helmet on, which he tied a blue ribbon to, and slid his mask into place. His last action was to summon his swords to the table before tying them securely to his waist, his katana slightly higher than his tanto, and reflexively pulled both swords out of their sheaths to make sure he had enough distance to draw before letting them slide back to their hilts. Lastly, he put on the cloak that had made his father famous, or at least his own rendition of it. He'd ordered it from a local tailor who had been associated with demigods in the past. 3 old ladies ran it, as he'd heard from Argus, who were really good with yarn. They'd made him a cloak that almost looked like his old man's from when he was Hokage, only with his own personal touch. It was a dark orange, almost red cloak, with white flames dancing at the edges and at the neckline. Unlike his father's, there was no writing on the back, though he planned to have it added later on. He tied his bag of shuriken and kunai to the inside of his right leg and shook out his cloak. All in all, in his own humble opinion, he looked like a badass. Annabeth yelled, "Blue team, forward." And it began. Everyone was cheering and shaking their swords, trading taunts and insults as they marched toward their respective spots in the woods. Annabeth was at the front of the group with a slightly stumbling figure Naruto figured was Percy, while Luke had fallen in next to the younger blonde. "So," he began, "are you sure that you want to do border guard? You know you'll be babysitting the new guy all night." Naruto smiled, though no one could tell with his mask on. Hi, I know. I'm just trying to stay out of the way. I did just change teams a few days ago, and as much as I like annoying Clarice, I'd rather she not hate me for capturing the flag as well." Luke nodded, "Well, if you change your mind, you're welcome to join us on the front lines." Naruto nodded in affirmation before patting Luke on the back and marching toward the creek. "Good luck, man." He heard a U2 as he walked into the thicket. It was a warm, sticky night. The woods were dark, with fireflies popping in and out of view. Not that Naruto minded at all, of course. In fact, it almost reminded him of Konoha, especially with the stream gurgling behind him. He and Percy were the only ones on border guard that night, though Percy seemed too nervous to talk. In the distance, the conch horn blew, and shortly thereafter, sounds of battle overtook the usually quiet forest. Nothing too exciting happened for a while after that though, except for some kid from Apollo sprinting across the stream to join the front lines. Still, it was getting boring fast. Naruto sighed as he decided to break the silence. "So how's camp treating you so far, Percy?" Percy seemed surprised for a moment but answered quickly nonetheless. "It's going good, I guess. Still getting used to everything." Percy nodded in ascension. "I just can't get over all of this god stuff." The blonde laughed, "Yeah, it really does take a while to get used to." His smile under his mask fell quickly though, "But I'm guessing that it isn't just that you're having trouble with, is it?" Percy looked surprised, then shook his head. "No, not really, I just can't stop thinking about my mom." "I heard about that. I'm sorry, Percy." Percy sighed, "It's okay, it's just." He sniffled a little bit and slouched in his posture, on the verge of crying. Luckily, he wasn't alone. Naruto walked over and patted him on the back. "Hey, it's alright. I understand." He took off his mask, showing Percy a weak smile. "I lost my uncle getting here, so I know where you're coming from." "Really?" Naruto grimaced internally but kept up his smile. Yeah, and a lot of other campers have similar stories. I just wanted you to know that we're here for you, alright? And, if you ever find out who took your mom or a way to get her back, you can count on your number one awesome ninja friend to back you up. Percy sniffled a little, thanks Naruto. Said Blonde smiled before sliding his mask back into place, don't mention it. It's what friends do after all. But we really should get back to guarding. No idea when someone will be coming this way after all. No sooner had he said this than he heard a growl, low and deep, somewhere behind Percy. He reflexively drew his katana and faced the noise before he heard another growl just behind him. They sounded big and had an evil aura around them, but they hadn't done more than growl before they crept back, or at least that's what Naruto guessed, and retreated into the underbrush. He let out a sigh and was about to sheath his sword before the brush on the other side of the creek exploded. 7 Ares warriors came yelling and screaming out of the dark and were heading towards them. You three get Naruto. We'll cream the punk. Clarus shouted in the dark. They charged across the stream, with the bulk of them headed towards Percy, as well as Clarus. The 3 that were headed towards the blonde advanced with shields raised, headed by one of the campers, John was his name, very cautiously. You know, the blonde said as he sheathed his sword fully, this isn't going to end well for you. John lowered his shield and charged, yelling all the while, you've got it wrong, traitor. When we're done, you won't be able to move for a month. He lunged forwards, aiming a downward slash at the blonde's helmet. Naruto simply sidestepped, causing the Ares warrior to falter and fall into the muddy bank of the creek. Then the other Ares campers charged, while their leader picked himself up and threw himself at the ninja. Unfortunately for all 3 of them, Naruto was a completely different kind of warrior, with different training. John reached him first and attempted a lunging jab, which Naruto again sidestepped, but this time grabbed his wrist and pulled until there was a certain amount of tension, before throwing him at the other 2 Ares campers, spraining his wrist in the process, as well as disarming him. They fell together with a great crash, followed by a moan of pain. Naruto walked over and seeing the other 2 attempting to recover, stomped on their shields, spraining, or breaking, their wrists as well. After 2 great cries of pain and admonishing from the blonde to stay down, he looked over to where Percy was getting beaten up by Clarus and the Ares campers. He already had a nasty cut on his arm and was soaking wet, having just been pushed into the creek. The blonde was about to intervene when something changed in Percy's stance. He had stood up to meet the advance of his tormentors, using the flat of his sword to knock the helmet off of the closest attacker, making him crumple like tissue paper in the water. The other 2 campers, besides Clarus, advanced, only for one of them to end up with a broken nose, courtesy of Percy's shield, and the other with a missing plume from his helmet, winded from the knee to the ribs that he'd gotten. Clarus was undeterred though, and tried to impale Percy with her spear. Percy simply sidestepped, but caught the shaft of the spear between his sword and shield, and snapped it. Naruto had to hold back a laugh, simply because he'd done the same thing to her in their first game. Ah, not again. She screamed. You idiot. You corpse breath worm. She probably would have said more, but whatever she was going to say died in her throat as Percy smacked her between the eyes with the butt of his sword, sending her stumbling out of the creek. He turned to Naruto, who was giving him a bewildered smile, and then back to his defeated opponents. Not a moment later, yells and cheers broke out near the boundary line. Luke came into sight first, holding the blood-red banner high as he made for the line, flanked by Hermes and Apollo campers, who were busy holding off the Hephaestus campers, and Castor and Pollux as well. The defeated Ares campers stood shakily and tried to meet him before he crossed the line, but it was too late. Everybody converged on the creek as Luke ran across into friendly territory. The blue team exploded into cheers. The red banner shimmered and turned to silver. The boar and spear were replaced with a huge caduceus, the symbol of Cabin 11. Everybody on the blue team picked up Luke and started carrying him around on their shoulders, while Chiron made his way from the woods, smiling at the victorious blues. Naruto smiled and took off his mask as he walked over to Percy. Good job holding them off, man. Where'd you learn to fight like that? Percy just shrugged with a happy smile, dunno, it just, kinda, came naturally to me. Not bad, hero. Annabeth said as she materialized in between the 2. Percy's attitude quickly worsened, you set me up, he said. You put me here because you knew Clarus would come after me, well you sent Luke around the flank. You had it all figured out. Annie shrugged, I told you. Athena always has a plan. Besides, you had the second best fighter in camp watching over you, Naruto gave a thumbs up, and I came as fast I could. I would have jumped in, but it didn't look like you, or Naruto, for that matter, needed help. Naruto's mind was elsewhere at this point though. Hey Annie, take a look at that. Annabeth looked at the older blonde before quickly looking where he was pointing. The wound that Percy had sustained in the midst of the fight. Or, at least what was left of it. How did you do that? She asked. Sword cut, Percy said. What do you think? Naruto shook his head, no. It was a sword cut. Look at it. Sure enough, he watched as the wound turned into a scar, then simply vanished altogether. I don't get it, he said. The fright and confusion was evident in his voice. A moment of silence broke out between the three as they thought of what could have caused it. Annabeth was the first to make a connection. Step out of the water, Percy. What? Just do it. He did as was asked and almost immediately fell over, but Annabeth caught and steadied him. Oh, sticks, she cursed. This is not good. I didn't want, I assumed it would be Zeus. Naruto stood silently, finally gaining some understanding into what was happening, but before he could put the pieces together, two howls ripped across the forest. The cheers abruptly ended and everyone adopted a defensive stance. Naruto slid his mask back into place, if only to see better, and drew his sword. A yell came from Chiron, but whatever he said, Naruto didn't hear. He was busy staring down the massive black hound on the hill above them, facing Percy. For an instant no one moved, then Annabeth shouted this time something, but Naruto was too focused on the giant black shadow charging toward him, or maybe charging toward Percy, but it seemed all too ready to go through him to get to the poor kid. In an instant, Naruto reacted. He got a kunai out of his pouch and threw it in less than a second, which hit the lumbering mountain in the shoulder, causing it to trip towards him, at a speed too high to avoid. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw another shadow lead toward Percy, but he didn't have the time to react to that. He lowered his sword in an instant as the rhino-sized beast was about to tackle him and raised it just as quickly. He heard a reliving schlick as his sword passed through the monster's skull, separating his brain from its jaw. Unfortunately, the beast had gotten too close before the kill and he felt 5 razor-sharp claws dig through his armor, straight into his shoulder as he was sent flying back 20 feet with the corpse of the behemoth back into the creek. Ugh, he thought as the monster on top of him began to dissolve, that's going to leave a mark. He heard the Kyuubi grumble and already on it in his mindscape as he shifted the weight of the, 2-ton dissolving dog off of him as best he could before wriggling his way out of the trapping corpse. He stood with assistance from Chiron, who had trotted over to him, only to see everyone staring at him, as well as another hellhound, stuffed with arrows, and Percy, bleeding beside it. That must have been the other shadow, but Naruto smiled as he saw that Percy was relatively unharmed. And that Annabeth was tending to him. He stifled an internal laugh at the irony of his earlier realization and how true it was. Chiron helped Naruto to the other two, bow in hand, with a grim face. Immortales. Annabeth exclaimed, those are hellhounds from the fields of punishment. They're not supposed to. Chiron grimly nodded, someone summoned them, he said. Someone inside the camp. Blue came over, planting the flag in the muddy ground and gave Naruto a pat on the back, which the blonde gave a thumbs up in response to and joined the conversation. Clarice had staggered to her feet and was standing with the Ares campers, it's all Percy's fault. Percy summoned it. She yelled. Naruto turned to glare at her, enough, Clarice. Everyone watched the body of the hellhound melt into shadow, soaking into the ground until it disappeared, although Naruto quickly noticed that one of the claws from the hellhound was still embedded in his shoulder. The others, Kyuubi was already beginning to close. Naruto grimaced in pain as he shrugged off his breastplate, feeling the stickiness of his shirt and the warm liquid flowing down his chest for the first time. Everyone was looking at him in concern, watching the small droplets of blood flow from his currently disabled arm into the creek he was standing in. Are you okay, Naruto? Annabeth asked, the concern evident in her voice. The blonde just grimaced, yeah, but this is going to hurt and I'll probably not be getting up tomorrow. Chiron, Luke, can I get some help here? They both nodded and held the blonde steady as he used his still mobile hand to grasp the root of the claw that was stuck in him. Chiron was already unraveling a bit of gauze tape he kept in case of injuries during these things, while everyone else was still staring. With a tug, the claw came loose, though he still held it in his hand, and Chiron wrapped his shoulder in gauze. Now Naruto said as the gauze was tightened, well, at least I got a trophy out of it. He looked at Percy, who was still on the bank of the creek, hey Percy, come here. You should get looked at too. Percy nodded and walked into the creek before stopping halfway. He instantly straightened. The wounds on his chest from the hellhound began closing up. A few of the campers gasped at the sight, but more gasped at the image that was slowly appearing above his head. Look, I don't know why, he tried to say. I'm sorry. Naruto shook his head, it's not that Percy. Look up. An image of a well-defined green trident spun like a top above his head, fading, but still visible, by the time he looked up. Your father, Annabeth murmured. This is really not good. It is determined, Chiron announced in an almost grim manner. All of the campers began to kneel, including the Ares cabin, though they did so begrudgingly. Naruto himself simply performed a deep bow, though no one complained. My father? Percy asked, completely bewildered. Poseidon, said Chiron. Earthshaker, Stormbringer, father of horses. Hail, Perseus Jackson, son of the god of the seas. Done. What if Naruto is the son of Kronos Percy Jackson? End here, and thanks for watching my video till the end.